Jean,
Present.
Ms. Hockenberry.
Here.
Mr. Meeks,
Here.
Mr. Rankin,
Here.
Ms. Rogers,
Here.
Ms. Teets is absent, and Mr. Wodisca is absent.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
I so move.
I second.
All those in favor signify
Aye.
by saying aye.
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 All right, we've adopted the agenda. Are there any petitions for anyone on anything, because we don't have a very full agenda? No? Excellent. Old business, none? No? Okay. New business, I would propose one thing. We have scheduled for June 1st a meeting, and I would propose that we advance our typical start time, assuming that it's okay with everyone.
To when?
I'd like 7:15. I would take 7:30. Okay, well, so then,
So we probably won't get to it, to get up here till.
Oh, that'd be miserable.
so we have a joint city council planning commission.
That is too much in one night.
Well, you know, these things change, so maybe we.
All right, well,
wait.
we're going to keep monitoring that, with your permission, through the month of May. All right. Fine. Other business? None? Okay, excellent. Motion,
No, planning director's report.
let's do the planning director's report. Well, I was gonna,
Oh, the minutes?
yeah, I was gonna do the minutes, but,
Oh, sorry,
let's
go
do the
ahead.
planning director's report.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, wanted to bring to your attention, we will be having a presentation by the Urban Land Institute Leadership Group of what's called a mini-TAP. And this is a look that this group has done for the city of the Gordon Road Triangle. I think that presentation is going to be next Monday, the 11th, starting around 4 o'clock. It's a skilled group of professionals who, as part of their leadership program, serve on such a group. The chair of it has met with us and with the property owners out there, and their presentation will be at 4 p.m. in the Dogwood Conference Room. So members of the commission are certainly invited to attend. We had a kickoff a few months ago, and so I'll be interested in seeing what their presentation yields. Also, I wanted to mention that the Easter Seals project had been nominated for the Urban Land Institute Trends Award. They had a Trends Conference this past Tuesday in D.C. at the Reagan Building, and it was one of 6 projects which actually won an award. There's a big glass obelisk up on the counter in the DDS offices for Best Institutional Project for 2015.
Child development.
A big honor for the city, and I think the city council is looking at having some kind of a presentation on May 11th at their meeting. Projects that also won included Reston Town Center, City Center downtown. I'll bring you a copy of the Trends booklet, but it was quite a good conference, and a very modest project was singled out as an exceptional project. So wanted to bring that to your attention. Also, we did have a site plan filing today for the 2005 Park Avenue project. The paperwork was just filed today, and you're having a work session on that tonight. So
Oh, how
we'll be
interesting.
following staff review and your input. That'll be coming to you this spring. We'll have to figure out the schedule on that, but those are some of the highlights I wanted to mention to you.
You'll send an email about the mini-TAP?
Yes, Lauren Bruce has been coordinating that, and we will send one out to you.
Okay. Any planning commission reports?
I just have question for Jim.
Oh.
Jim, when is the topping off of Harris Teeter?
I believe it's May 22nd, if my memory serves me correctly.
Could we get an email on that,
There
too?
was an email that was sent out, which we received a copy of, but I believe it was May 22nd. We can double-check that for
I
you.
don't remember seeing that. Did you? I don't think we got an email.
I think I saw an email.
Also, I believe May 12th, there is a ribbon-cutting dedication of Jesse Thackeray School.
We got our invites.
So those also were invitations, so got a lot of projects that are, hitting an important, critical stage, and trying to celebrate some of those.
Okay. Planning Commission reports? Anyone?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say nothing, but I have an architectural advisory board meeting tomorrow, so my report will be next week, next time we meet.
Okay.
And I just want to announce, I don't have any reports either. No. The EDC meeting was postponed, so it will
Yes.
go on at a different time.
And I was intrigued by the agenda, and sorry I couldn't be there, although it was postponed. So, okay, motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. And without any further ado, we will adjourn for the work session. And I notice we're setting up,
I have a little bit of issue with that one, so we're setting the external projector. A couple of minutes now.
Can we stay up here?
do you want us up here for, so you don't, yes, okay, so
I think it's probably best if you stay up there and,
without any further ado, we're adjourned. So maybe let's do Cloverdale first. Should we keep our microphones on because we're recording?
Yes, please.
Okay. We should do Cloverdale first, and then, because I'm imagining you don't have audio-visual presentation materials?
that would make sense, and the more lengthy project is Mason Row. The Cloverdale project, or 205 Park, as many of you know it as the blue and gray building, along with the Oddfellows Hall. It was positioned in its location, I believe, in the early 50s, having been moved from Park Avenue. The Oddfellows Hall was torn down and rebuilt new, and the location next to it, I think they came kind of as a package. Both groups kind of outgrew their membership, and so the properties have changed hands. The blue and gray building was in very poor shape, and there was a lot of concern about it surviving. It has been purchased by Mr. Normile. His team will make a presentation. They've cleaned it up and stabilized it, and there have been a number of interesting and interested sessions with the Historic Commission, the HERB, the Architectural Advisory Board, as a prelude to putting together a more formal plan for submission as a site plan for this group to review. One of the good things about the city's ordinance is that there is a clause in the parking standards that parking is determined for historic sites following a recommendation by the Historical Commission to be determined by the Planning Commission. I think that recognizes that it's, particularly with older structures, there are challenges. One of the things you'll see in this presentation has been an effort to retain and restore the original portion of the house, which I think was in the late 1700s, and develop a restaurant on another portion of the site, it's Zone B2. With that, I'll let the applicant preview for you some of their thoughts. The purpose of this is really to get the commission a preview and reaction and comments before the site plan goes through staff review and comes to you for formal action. Again, this is 205 Park Avenue. It's the corner of Park and Maple between what was the Oddfellows Hall, now the Kearns Architectural Group, and Walter Phillips Engineering Building, just down the street from us.
Thank you, Planning Commission. My name is Brian Normal. I'm the owner of 205 Park.
There you go.
I've never been told, Deborah, I wasn't loud enough. And this is my associate, Keith Stricker, who's prepared all the architecture work so far on the plan. We really appreciate the opportunity tonight to come and speak about the project. The reception in Falls Church has been fantastic so far in terms of the boards that we've met and the people that we've worked with to date. As Jim said, we've met with the AAB, the HALRB, we met with the Historic Commission, we've had numerous meetings with staff to talk about the project. And I think if you're familiar, obviously, with the site and with the building, this was obviously a pretty tired asset. My experience is as a commercial and residential developer, doing significant renovation projects, not often of buildings that are quite as old as this, but I do have pretty significant experience in renovation of stuff that's 1800s and forward. This was a project that really was a head scratcher for me as a developer. I love the site. I love Falls Church as a market to develop a restaurant in. I think it's pretty underserved out here. And really, but this project was one where the existing building, obviously, the condition that it had fallen into was beyond disrepair. I don't think that anyone really had been in there other than squirrels and chipmunks and birds in the last 7 years before I bought it. And frankly, the day I closed on it, I came in there to find a flood in the basement. There was probably 8 to 10 inches of water. So that was really what I got. And my initial read on it was, this is a difficult project. I really should think about taking this building down and starting ground up. But through a little bit of discussion with planning staff and through a lot of the folks that I met, including the Harb, I really sat down and I thought about the project and took my developer hat and kind of threw that out the window and really looked at what was there and what the building meant really to the community, and really thought about the project in the context of that, about how do we make this project work as a renovation, and how do we get, at the same point, a viable plan that supports a coffee shop restaurant. I don't know if staff's familiar with Northside Social, but that's one of my projects that I own and built in Arlington. And I really look at this site and this opportunity being a chance to really renovate another historic building like that was, and really, bring it to the community. So at this point, that gives you a little bit of how I first looked at this. And obviously the site is challenging. It's 10,000 square feet. Parking is a concern, and I knew that coming in. And I really started with this project with that being one of the big considerations that I really knew that I needed support from the city on. Was this project important enough? Was this building important enough? And all I got was a resounding answer that yes, we really think that you should look at restoration of what's there. We understand from a commercial standpoint, you need a viable business. And when you look at my plans, you can see we came up with a pretty significant addition, which I think has to be built in order for the project to really work. But what it ends up on the site with is really a tight and a constrained site. And now, why don't we take a minute or two and we can kind of go through what the project really is. I'm sure you've probably seen it before today, but the goal in the context was to take the original buildings that had been moved to the site, as Jim said, in the 1950s, and really try to do everything that we could to bring them back to life while keeping in the context of the materials that are there and the window patterns and the siding detail. We're really committed to trying to bring back exactly what's there. And the reality is, because it's been put into this situation of disrepair, there's going to be a lot of material that's going to need to be replaced. Obviously, windows, the majority of the siding, a lot of the exterior trim. I know that from historic renovation and renovation stuff I've done, the more you dig into it, the worse it's going to be. And I really found that as I opened up the side of this building. Planning staff asked me to take a look at what this looks like behind the siding. And it's an abomination. If you go by the side of this building, you could see what it looked like behind the walls. I mean, it was termite damage and water damage, and that was just what I could see from a section that's 4x4. But in context, the goal is really to preserve as much as we can and really bring it back to life. As it relates to the new work, can you take me around, Keith, or do we have another slide, Deborah? We got guidance, and we came through it, had a couple iterations with the AAB. And we really went back to the guidelines of, historic renovation. And the goal really was to come up with an addition that didn't take away from the historic nature of the original asset. Many would think that you really should try to build something close to what's there in terms of style and materials. After doing the research that we did and spending time with AAB, the goal really became, and the feedback that we got, was to really come up with some design that didn't necessarily complement what was there, but more contrasted. So we went with really a more contemporary design as it relates to the architecture, such that when you look at the building and you look at the project, you can tell that which is historic and that which is new. And really that break line was really what we were looking for. And from the side elevation, you can actually see that really the front stands out on its own.
I mentioned one thing. I think the first version you all did was more of a blend of, trying to have a period style addition. It was a pretty strong reaction at the HERB that was the wrong approach. Deborah, you were there, and so there was a lot of direction to have the original building restored and the additions done in a more modern context. That came from a number of architects in the group.
Right. And then at subsequent meetings with the board and with Charlie Moore, there was a very, very favorable reaction to where we came up. And it's now at a point where we're really excited about the design. I mean, we really think it's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood. The goal being, too, that we really wanted to create some nice outdoor spaces. So if you look at the front rendering on the Park Street side, you can see we've created some outdoor space. That's sort of the first picture on the slide underneath the umbrella space. The goal is to create flagstone patio space, probably 30 outdoor seats, umbrellas. And what we've created really on the front is also a handicapped entrance that kind of comes up the right side on the Walter Phillips building side, but really doesn't take away or distract from the original building. So we were careful to really tuck that in. Obviously, we plan to landscape along the front of the site. We really look at this patio space being premier to the site. We want really the site to look enlivened. I mean, as you're coming down Park Avenue and you're coming up Maple, we really want there to be, a vibrant feel. And we really like that about this corner. The additional plantings and the trees that are there should make that front a really inviting space. And then as we get to the side elevation, you can see we created what's a sort of a tiered patio. It's going to be up about 3.5 feet from the lot below. And then as you look at this rendering, you can see the upper tier. That's actually going to be a wine bar concept that we do up there. And once again, different use of materials. We can run through that kind of quickly. Keith, can you hold this up for a second? So if you look at the thought process, why don't you kind of run us through, Keith, the use of the materials?
We kind of have the existing building on this side.
Could you use the microphone if you could?
Oh, there we go.
Sort of have the existing building materials on this side and the new on this side. So we've used a wood siding to use the same reveal and similar material as the existing building in the wood siding. A metal roof that would have potentially been used in that period, although it could have been a shingle roof, but a more durable roof to last. And then just a white corner board for the corners of the trim. We'll also be using the same color on the lower portion of the new piece to kind of tie it in, but a different siding material, board and batten, which is still of that period, but obviously a vertical instead of a horizontal siding. And then using a horizontal siding up top on the addition that is a similar orientation as this, but definitely a more modern feel, stained wood, but still not getting too over the top with any metal panels or stainless steel or something like that. Something warm and still complementary to the existing. That's about the...
Thank you, Keith. So, I mean, as it relates to the project and kind of where we've gotten to now, staff had suggested that it was a good idea to come in front of you for guidance on the plan. We obviously have really tried to fast track the project. I felt like I was coming up here to Falls Church every 2 weeks from all the meetings that we were going to. No, it was great. I appreciate the speed, trust me. So no, we really tried to keep the project moving. Walter Phillips is handling all of our civil engineering. They've been very engaged, and we've gotten our site plan filed. And now Keith and my architecture team is really working on development of construction drawings. And really our hope is to have the entire set sort of filed in the city's hands by the end of the month. So that's a little rundown on the project. More than happy to answer any questions and any guidance that we can get from today would be fantastic.
Looks pretty good to me. I think a little more than a year ago, I actually walked through the building with my brother. We were looking at places for our business, and it was terrible. And at the time, we thought, it'd be cool. I live in a historic house, it'd be nice, but we just didn't see any way to make anything of it. So the fact that you guys have come up with something that could work, to me, is impressive. And I would say the alternative is the whole thing gets torn down. So I think it's a great idea. I'm okay with the parking recommendations. I don't know, that hasn't come up yet, but I think in that particular area there are some parking options. So all around, I think it's a pretty great approach for a building that otherwise didn't have much future.
I just wanted to mention too that I'm fine with the parking because there's city-owned parking really close to there. And a lot of businesses in that area already depend on the city-owned parking. They don't have their own parking as much as they should anyway.
Is there any parking at all around it?
On the site, we
I mean, it looks as it is now, that there are lots of spaces, but I could see that maybe all that isn't your property. Is that correct?
It's not. The,
It's kind of a weird situation in the sense that the parking that is against the landscaped area, I think this must have all been done at one time, because those spaces are actually now part of the Oddfellows property. The aisles
right.
to get to there are part of this property. And so I think when all this was done in the 1950s and they came over as a group, it was one package. It's been split up since then.
I see.
We have heard that in talking with the Kaiser folks, there's seems to be a willingness to extend the hours of, or the day, the evening parking
Yeah, it's
during
not
the
too
week,
bad.
in addition to the weekends, at least verbally, when we had a meeting. So I think, we're continuing to look for more parking assets in that area.
Well, and it.
Public parking in the lot.
Right.
You're
And
right
also,
across
it's
the
close enough to City Hall, isn't it, that they could use that parking at night?
Yes.
Or
it
is that not allowed? Yeah, okay.
And if you think of some of the more
Yeah.
popular restaurants in the city, some of them don't have any parking. This really fits the concept of this small infill area where we talked about core commercial and entertainment area, where we have fragmented ownership, small buildings, individualized retail and offices, and this fits that same pattern, as does the reuse of the Oddfellows building.
Right.
So I think, in terms of our small area plan, we're looking to try to retain and reposition historic structures so they could be viable economically, fill in these small pieces with something that would add to the community. So we
And it's
think it
also,
fits that
it's
plan.
all commercial around that. I mean, every
Yes,
way it
it's all
faces.
It's all B2, actually.
Yeah.
And
well,
B2
I-
requires at least a
This
two-story
comment.
construction.
Only one here.
And this is 2 stories in a basement, I believe, the additions. As a minimum, you have to have 2 stories, so that's good, I think, as well.
I think it's a great reuse of this property. Thanks.
I think the wine bar idea is really great.
See, that's be there with you.
And I like the view. I like the fact that you've created this view from that. Hopefully, so is that a two-story in that area in the wine bar, or is it just are
The
these? Just,
ceilings start at 9 feet at this
Okay.
outside wall, and they actually vault to, what's probably going to be, what, Keith, about 14 to 15 feet?
so can you have a view from those big windows that you have
You'll
there?
be able to definitely look out the side.
Oh, okay,
And
that's
look
great.
out this way as well.
That's
And
wonderful.
one thing that we're sort of considering now,
To look at, but come on.
we're also considering potentially going over this roof right here
Ah.
with a little bit more outdoor.
Oh, that's really nice.
That would be
You should have shown that. That would have been like spectacular.
that would-
Okay. And then, what's the maximum occupancy that this
Where'd we end up, Keith?
this building can take for the whole building?
I'm not sure what the maximum is, but we have. I'll have it on here.
We were in the 120, I think about 125.
120? Yeah, I was looking at that, in contrast to the parking needs of the space, but I guess you've worked it out with Kaiser. You said, I
Well,
thought I
I'm
heard.
saying, the city has successfully, kind of had a good working relationship with Kaiser, that the weekend experiment has gone well, and in more recent meetings, they said, we are willing to expand that during the evening all week. And so I think we're going to continue to work with them to make parking that otherwise is vacant available. And there is also some city surface parking lots, as well as parking at City Hall and the city lot nearby. So the notion is to park once and walk to a variety of stores.
Yeah. And then finally, I like the use of the materials. I think it's really great.
Those are nice materials.
And the colors are, the contrasting colors here are just wonderful. So,
Yes.
thank you. Good luck.
May I? I think it looks great. This would be another opportunity for us to probably, maybe try to get everybody together and try to be nice to each other about parking. And along with that line, we've got to have better signs as to where the city parking is, because the blue stripes are kind of worn away down there and over on the other side. But particularly with that Realtor building. I mean, that's just ridiculous, the trouble that they've had with Dogwood. But I think it just looks just exciting. It's a nice little corner for that, a nice place for it. Because we're really wanting to do a lot with that whole area down there in the 100, 200 block. Thank you.
Just have a quick question. I wanted to know what the material for the patio in the front will be.
We'd really like to set that, Karen, we've set it as flagstone.
Yeah, just some sort of paper, paper, not like a concrete.
Okay, thank you.
Want to watch out for impervious surfaces.
I just want to know what the parking requirements would have been for this space. Do we know?
I'd have to ask this, I don't have an exact count. Typically, it's 1 for 250 for the area used for serving area, the restaurant area itself. Of course, that varies depending on where you are. Different places have different standards. But I believe it's 1 for 250 for the area that's used for serving customers. I can double check that with the zoning administrator, though. In this case, though, because of the historic nature, there is this piece of the code that specifically calls out for historic sites, that it's up to the planning
Horse and
commission
buggy?
to decide those things, based with a recommendation from the historical commission. So I think one of the good things about that is it recognizes that you had buildings that were here before cars, this one was, and they sometimes are sited in ways that are not convenient to meeting modern parking standards. And so it's really up to the commission as a part of the site plan, based on recommendations from the historical commission, to decide the parking for this particular building, because it's historic.
So when this comes back to us, do we have to make the actual recommendation or
I
make the
think what you would do, because we went through this with the zoning administrator, you'd basically be looking at the site plan and approving or not approving it, or approving it with tweaks or changes. So there'll be a site plan that will show the building, the additions, the handicap parking arrangement. There, I believe, is a stormwater collection system that will be underground and hidden. So you'll see the site plan for the project in your role as planning commission. I believe there may be a couple of waivers in terms of green space between the handicap parking and the sidewalk. So there are a couple of small waivers, I think, that are part of this application.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to understand if we had, what actions we needed to take at the time of approval. But, yeah, just to repeat what everybody else said, it looks like a wonderful use of what is a historic structure and a difficult site. So I give it a lot of support.
I also walked this building when it was on the market, and my hat is off to you because I did not have the vision that you have. I was, and I've been part of some big renovations, but this sort of scared me at every level. So you deserve all the credit we can give you. I am not an architect and don't have a very good aesthetic sense, but I did see sort of a similar thing where there was a historic building. It was actually up in Massachusetts. And if I could get the details, I can, but what they did in the contemporary structure is all the angles were exactly the same. So in other words, it was a contemporary building, but the angles and dimensions exactly matched the older building. So it looked proportionate, if that makes sense. So in other words, if there was an angle on the roof, it was the same as the contemporary angle. It was pretty cool. Just something I would pass on. This is a brilliant thing. Do you have access to the parking that was part of the old Oddfellows? Wasn't there?
At this point in time, there's really no arrangement anywhere that's been written as it relates to that parking.
So I heard a story, if this is helpful to you. There was an attorney in town named Farnham Johnson who was the attorney for the office building. He is unfortunately subsequently dead. But he was the attorney for the concrete office building that was built at the corner of Park and Little Falls. Forever. I think he was here for 50 years. He was the attorney, and I think told me the story that they did not do an easement, but they split it up this way, but there had always been an easement in practice. So I don't know if that, I have no idea how we would track that down. Farnham is unfortunately passed on. He was a terrific guy. And the guys who moved the building have passed on. They used to be around, they were around forever, but I think they set it up with the intention that those spaces were available. And I'm not sure if the city would have that record.
Well, and what's interesting is that you can't use those spaces without using the aisles that is on this property, and you can't use those. So there is an implied cooperation because you've got to use their driveway to use those spaces. So.
If Farnham were around, I would. He was a good friend of mine. He graduated from college 50 years to the day after I did from the University of Colorado. This is what a small world it is. We were in the same fraternity. We lived in the same room. We met each other here in the early 90s. It was just a weird story, but he was full of these things. Unfortunately, he's passed on, but if that's helpful to you, which it's not, I got that. We'll move on. But
we do think it's all happened at the same time.
It did, and it
That's
was
part of the
so just go back in history. The guys who did it, one of them owned the concrete plant where the fire station is, that's on the Arlington County line. He built that building, and he was an odd fellow. He was the one who set this. I think he did it intentionally. That's why I say I don't know what records the city has, but I think they were intending this to be an easement, which it may not help you. You may spend more in legal fees. So that's fine. Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to helping if we can.
Ask a silly question. Is Charlie Moore hovering over your shoulder on this?
We got some good input.
And Charlie actually went through one of the early walkthroughs and had some very good comments at the HARB. And
He's our
we've gotten
homegrown.
good, we had some good suggestions also from the Kearns Group architects, so
Yeah.
people have been very constructive, I think.
I'd say the process has been great so far, and there's just been a lot of support. So we thank you here tonight for your guidance.
You bet. Our pleasure. Let us know if we can do anything else to help.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Exciting.
Okay.
This is the place, right?
Yeah. That be it. Right in the corner.
Let's talk about the agenda. And I ask because we've got this huge package, and I suspect we'll have more questions. If you have a presentation, I don't want to, do you have a presentation and how long is it?
The only thing I want to hear are changes.
Can you do it in 9 minutes? Well, we got this, so this will be, I'm asking the question, I'm not trying to be difficult. So we've seen, I think this will be our sixth or seventh time in seeing the presentation. So I think we got the gist of it, and we saw your changes, and I know, speaking with everyone except Andy, specifically, there are more questions on what you've given us. So if you could just sort of quickly cover the changes and not like feel like you have to start from scratch, that would help us all out. Does that seem? I know you're an artist, and I don't want to, like, if you've got the Seventh Symphony written here, I don't want to.
It's more important to get the feedback from you all, hear your questions. That's our main objective.
Yes, absolutely. So like in
We'll highlight.
the highlight of the changes, that would be great.
We're going to try to oblige you in every possible way. I'm Dave Lasso. I'm representing the developers this evening, and that really is where we wanted to start, to sort of bring you up to speed on the changes that have been made, because it's easy to get confused about what it is that you're looking at and what in the heck have we been doing in all the intervening time. But when we met in August and got first reading from the council, and I was back looking at the minutes, you may recall that the clear directive, unanimous directive of the council was there shall be a second anchor or there's no project. So with that as the direction, Peter Batten and Dick Pascal set about finding that anchor while we were having additional meetings, talking to the neighbors, just a long series of meetings and an incredible amount of work. That's how the movie theater was obtained, and that became the second anchor. So by January 30th, which is when that second anchor was added into the project, the new plans had the theater, which has the screens underground, which is a critical component to understanding how the project works. Added some above-ground parking. That, bringing the theater underground, displaced some of the underground parking and added some costs. And the way that the costs of the project were frankly brought under control was the use of above-grade parking. Above-grade parking, as you all know, cost about half what underground spaces cost. And sometimes the differential is even greater. By doing that, that also allowed Mason Lane to be put in and to be widened. The Market Square doubled in size. If you remember, there was a criticism that the actual area was just too darn small. It doubled, and it's gotten very substantial, large enough that we've talked to Parks and Recs. We think you could do the farmer's market here if that's what you wanted to do. Remove the small parking lot on Northwest Street. That's where the 7-Eleven was talked about going. We removed the residential condominium building, had 67 units, added a second signalized intersection at West Broad Street. That was in originally, then it was out, now it's back in, which I think is a good thing, and Will can add some expertise to that if you want to talk about that. The parking garage access on Park Avenue was a huge problem for the neighbors on Park Avenue. That was removed. So there's no vehicular access at all on Park Avenue. All of the access comes through Mason Lane. The key, you notice the key piece is in terms of the net new commercial area and the net new income to the city, which is the primary criterion by which special exceptions are judged, both for height and for mixed use. That is the singular criterion that's set out in the code, is that income has gone from 26% to 33%. You'll see later in the fiscal analysis that's gone up. The building heights, when we say unchanged, they were at 85 feet. They're still at 85 feet on the residential piece. The residential gross square footage area is unchanged. In other words, that stayed the same even though more commercial was added. We added a 44,000 square foot movie theater, but yet the residential area stayed the same. And that's important when you think about this project. You hear repeatedly in every mixed-use project that you've had that the way that these projects work, if you will, financially, is because the land cost, the underground parking or above-grade parking, all of the huge costs of the mixed-use projects for the commercial piece are made feasible by having the multifamily component. So there's always a dynamic of how much multifamily do you need to help you keep the cost of the commercial under control. And so the council pushes for more and more commercial, and then sometimes you see those numbers go up, and that's the dynamic. If you remember, the Rushmark project ended up at about a 70,000 square foot commercial component with 286 dwelling units that helped pay for 70,000 square feet of commercial space. This project has 187,000 square feet of commercial and 340 units. So you can see we have far fewer commercial multifamily units supporting the commercial space. That's largely made possible by the way that the team has worked with the parking and laid the structure out, and they've been able to spread that out over a much larger area. The area of the site is 4.3 acres. Rushmark is 2.6. So all of the projects that you've seen in recent time, Tinner Hill is 2.2. Rushmark, again, 2.6. Spectrum's about 2.1. This is 4.3. So yes, it's a much bigger building. It's got a whole lot more moving parts, but the site is literally twice as large as what you've seen in the past. So the current submission made some major changes. We were still receiving, and frankly justifiably so, criticism about Park Avenue. And so now you see a plan that took that garage, it's a rectangle, the above-grade garage, and rotated it 90 degrees. It reduced the parking, the total height of the parking garage dropped a floor and a half. It's now 55 feet. It was almost 80 feet. It added retail space in the front of the garage along Park Avenue. You're probably wondering, why did that happen? It happened because there was a request by the council, please find a way of providing some retail space for the existing local tenants. That could be in an area that's not as desirable as Broad Street or West Street, so the rent would be lower. It's a little bit quieter, frankly, if you will, so the rents could be lower, the space is not as desirable. They ask us to do, try portico retail. That's what Tinner Hill did. This is not portico retail, but it's not unlike that. So the area, the front part of the above-grade parking structure now has a retail strip. No vehicular entrance, but rather pedestrian access. So you'll want to pay special attention, and we want to talk about that with you a little bit later. So that's where the retail area is. And above that, there's a parking level on top of that. And then the parking garage steps back 9 feet. That's a new situation. Steps back 9 feet and then goes up 2 additional levels. The final actual facade of that parking structure is one of the issues. We really need your help on that guidance. We have gotten so much contradictory advice about what to do on Park Avenue. Everything from initially when this project, when I began to be involved, was make it a parking garage, a big parking garage, because boy, we need parking. Was also make it a park. Don't have anything on that site. Then it was add a couple of residences, 3 residents. All good ideas in their own right, but all with problems. Then different iterations, and this is kind of where we are right now, but it's working. We like it a lot, and we'll see where you all are. So we're trying to earn a bonus for that extra height, not a variance, it's a bonus. We want to earn it by providing the types of uses that are set out in the special exception ordinance, giving you that income generation. A desired use of theater is specifically mentioned in the special exception ordinance as a way to earn the bonus height. Outdoor dining, a market square, these are all specifically mentioned in your zoning code about the types of uses that you can have to earn that bonus height. And here, the spectrum is 85 feet. The Byron building's 85, Rushmark is 92, and of course Rushmark's almost topped out, so you can see what that is. The current, the comp plan, and that's a big piece, and we're very grateful for the staff report on this. And it really boils down to what's the best way to make the transition between this mixed-use project, which for the whole site area will be zoned B1 with a comprehensive plan designation of mixed use, which means that the small area that's low-density residential needs to be changed to mixed use. Within the mixed use comp plan designation and within the B1 zone is where we have to craft a transitional area that goes from the taller building, more intensive use, to make an effective transition to the low-density houses that are going to remain on Park Avenue. And that's what this exercise is really all about. The zoning code doesn't have a specific way to do this. You struggled with it on Rushmark. The result is a little bit different area for sure, but you do have an R district right next door, 30 feet from a building that's 92 feet tall. 30 feet from a building that's 92 feet tall. Spectrum is a building that goes from 85 feet down to about 55 feet on Park Avenue, and then it's a wall of townhouse-style offices that are 55 feet high. Different solutions for different situations, and I've described what we have here. And we should talk about that. I'm going to turn it over now, please, to Peter.
Just want to give you some comparison data. I'll go through this very quickly. There's economic data and land use data comparing Mason Row with some other recent approved mixed-use projects. I'll just pick out a few data points that are land use oriented. As Dave mentioned, the site area for Mason Row is substantially larger than the other mixed-use projects in Falls Church. Also, the project has residential units per acre, you'll see in the middle of that chart, 79 units per acre in residential density compared to the other projects that we have there on the chart, 110, 190. We think we've done a very, very good job in keeping this project on course financially. We've worked really hard to keep the amount of residential units per acre down to a moderate level. Another point I'd like to make is further down the chart, there's a data point about commercial area per residential unit. Mason Row has 550 gross square feet of commercial per residential unit, and that's about twice as much commercial square footage per unit as the other mixed-use projects here in Falls Church. Relevant to that is in the middle of the chart going back up, percentage of commercial in this project, which folks talk a lot about here in Falls Church. Mason Row, we think, has gotten to a substantial level. Now at about a third of the project is commercial compared to the other mixed-use projects on the chart that are below 20%. The last thing I just wanted to point out is a land use issue is, of course, transitioning these projects to our districts within, in this case, we use 60 feet as a reference. The Spectrum has a 50-foot tall office building there on Park Avenue with a 14-foot streetscape setback off the curb. Tenor Hill is not adjacent to or on a street with a residential neighborhood. Rushmark is. They're 92 feet, as Dave said, with retail residential and a loading area adjacent to the residential district. We are coming in contact with Park Avenue, and at Park Avenue we are at 35 feet, and then we step back to 55 feet in total height for the garage, with retail in front of the garage. And how do I flick this? Okay. This is just going through some of the monetary values for the community benefits, the market square. I'll go through this very quickly. The contribution to transportation improvements, the cash contribution to the Housing Commission for affordable dwelling units. We're proposing to make this contribution to their fund. And then the cash contribution that would be made and allocated to the different beneficiaries there on the list, the schools, bike sharing, parks, the Catch Foundation, and the City Public Library, for the total amount of a little over $6.25 million. I'm going to pass through that. That's just a description of our residential product and the target market being millennials and empty nesters, and a comparison to Pearson Square of our one-bedrooms product and our two-bedroom product compared to their ones, twos, and threes, which has an impact on cost to the city. Dave mentioned this. The project is anchored. There are three definite commercial anchors, the hotel. The theater is it's not a multiplex theater like you see in a lot of large-scale projects where you see 14 screens, 16 screens. This is an urban-style theater. Most of the urban-style theaters have 7 to 8 screens, and they are doing some things differently than a typical multiplex. They're bringing food to the theater seat, drinks, and so forth, which is what the concepts that we're contemplating for Mason Row will be doing. And then the public space itself is an anchor. The Market Square will be programmed. We're doing a lot of work with the Catch folks to provide programming of the Market Square. This would be in the form of concerts and festivals. Mason Lane is part of the public space as an extension of the Market Square. And we have a design scheme whereby we can block Mason Lane off strategically to expand the capacity of the public space for public events and concerts. This is just a preliminary layout done by the StreetSense folks who are in charge of the leasing and are the lead folks in the retail planning. StreetSense is well known in the marketplace for urban retail planning. And what you see there is a division of space. We have a mixture of what's called quick service restaurants. These are trendy, fast casual style restaurants, and what we call casual dining, which are full service restaurants, and chef driven, which is a version of casual full service restaurants that is a higher end type of experience. And mixed together with those restaurants will be boutiques, shops. There will be some neighborhood services, coffee shops, wine and cheese shops, wine bar, and a fitness-oriented type of tenant. And the idea here is the dominant presence of the commercial retail will be on West Broad Street with outdoor dining and a mixture of other types of retail. And Mason Lane is the other dominant retail experience, whereby you've got Mason Lane combined with the Market Square with retail restaurants and shops facing one another and creating the synergy with the use of large 20-foot size sidewalks for outdoor dining and so forth. And you can see the ground level retail, convenient retail parking, as we like to call it, right there with pedestrian access coming from the garage on both sides of the center retail building. There'll be also an extension of retail parking below this ground level on a mezzanine level and one level below the mezzanine. This is just a list of the different types of tenants within the categories that I've been talking about. Some of them you might be familiar with. Specialty grocer is something that we're looking into. We have gotten some preliminary interest from a couple of the leading organic markets. The QSR, again, the quick service restaurants, the Sweetgreens and the Cavas, those kinds of tenants that you're probably familiar with. Casual dining, full service, and then the fine dining folks. We've talked to some on that list already, and there is significant interest in Mason Row by those tenants. And then there's an example of some of the goods and services that would be mixed into a mixed-use project like this. And just real quickly, this is to give you an idea of how the public space works. The pink is a small area for a small concert or a performance. The dark little red box represents a stage. That space is about 7,000 square feet, but in its smallest form, that square area within those buildings is about 10,000 square feet. So it's substantial for small performances and concerts. That space can be expanded. We would, where you see the dotted red line at the bottom there where Mason Lane meets West Broad Street, and just above the pink area represents closing of Mason Lane in that particular area, which provides a direct line of sight to the stage and doubles the space available for a performance in that public space. And this is to show in those certain instances where there may be a large-scale festival, where we would block the entire Mason Lane off. Parking for all of the uses is still available through West Broad Street at the eastern access point. And this could happen a couple of times a year for things like the Blues Festival, for example. We've talked to the Catch folks about that. And you can see that Mason Lane with the Market Square provides substantial space for that kind of event. And this is just a list of the performances that we've worked with the Catch organization. I won't take the time tonight to go through all of those, but we've spent considerable time talking about the kinds of events that would work really well in the Market Square or in this public space, and how we'd go about doing it, what kind of sound we need to provide, and stage capabilities and lighting and what have you. Will? I'm going to have Will Johnson talk real briefly about transportation and the things that we're doing with the road improvements and the impact that the project has on the road system.
Good evening. My name is Will Johnson with the firm of Wells & Associates. I promise I'll be brief. This is the same information that was presented to council at first reading, so I won't belabor, but I do want to highlight some of the changes from previous iterations regarding traffic access and the like. What you see here is the existing conditions. Our site boundary is the purple line, and then the blue shaded areas are the existing access points, 14 in total. Which in our view represents a very haphazard access scheme under existing conditions. We've done the traffic study for this application where we've been through several iterations alongside the plan, and our current iteration does reflect the current development program, the residential, the hotel, the commercial, as well as the theater, which we did include as a separate trip generating item, so I want to emphasize that point. Our traffic study currently reflects the proposed access scheme, which has undergone several changes over the past year or so. I'm just going to quickly walk around what we're proposing in terms of traffic improvements, particularly at the roads and sidewalks. I do want to point out, like Dave mentioned earlier, we did remove the direct access off of Park Avenue. That's no longer in the plan, no direct vehicular access from Park Avenue. What's highlighted in the pink box is the intersection of Park Avenue and West Street, and then where Mason Lane ties in. This intersection received an enormous amount of attention over the course of this application, and what we have here is a realignment of the intersection to make it a more traditional four-legged intersection. We are proposing a traffic signal, one of two that we are proposing with this project, which we think offers a significant operational benefit to this intersection, which frankly operates under less than safe conditions today. Along with the traffic signal, we are putting crosswalks on all four approaches, including the accommodation of a future realignment of the W&OD trail, which would actually swoop down from its current alignment and actually cross at the intersection with a pedestrian bicycle push-button control. And we're also adding a turn lane on the eastbound approach to help with capacity. This is the intersection of Grove Avenue and West Street. Again, another intersection that's received a lot of attention. In a previous iteration of the plan, we were proposing a channelization of the Grove Avenue approach to right in, right out only. We received a handful of comments about that. We're no longer proposing that. We revisited and decided that there were other ways to improve the intersection with less impact to the residents along Grove, including a new pedestrian crosswalk along West Street, a comment that we received from a number of sources. Pedestrians currently cross that location today from the Grove Avenue side over to the existing businesses. We recognize that will keep happening. We need to make it safer, so we're including a marked crosswalk as well as a refuge island in the middle of West Street to calm traffic and to channelize that movement. We're also working with the Park Authority with the crossing on Grove Avenue as well as the crossing with West Street to make sure that we appropriately address the safety concerns evident there. And then this is the intersection of West and Broad, the big intersection in our network. The chief improvement that we are proposing is a third southbound lane. Right now there are two. We're looking to carve a third lane within the existing width. We're going to carve a little bit from our side of West Street to add that lane to accommodate it and basically to add capacity and frankly some more efficiency to that intersection. We're also proposing a corresponding left turn lane into the Wells Fargo bank across the street from us. And we're also improving the crosswalks at our quadrant of the intersection to best provide for ADA compliance. And then lastly, I want to highlight the intersection at Broad Street and our easternmost site access, as Dave mentioned earlier. Initially, we had the signal in the plan, then we took it out because based on the trips that we were generating at the time, we weren't convinced that warrants would be met for signalization out there. However, with the introduction of the theater as well as the removal of the Park Avenue access, the analysis concluded that the intersection with Broad Street becomes more critical, and we do believe we can meet the warrants for signalization out there, which not only helps the vehicular movements into and out of the site, but also provides for controlled pedestrian crossing of the intersection, which is currently lacking. This is a snapshot from our traffic analysis. Again, this is information that we presented before, but what I wanted to highlight were the comparisons of the various levels of service at the intersections from the three different scenarios: the existing level of service, and then what we call the background level of service, which is future conditions without the project if we never developed. And then lastly, the total future conditions, which is future with our site. And what we found is that with our improvements in place, we actually improved the level of service in a number of cases, particularly at the West and Park Avenue intersection, where the signal does improve operations better than existing conditions. And likewise, at West and Broad, we do improve levels of service between background and total future conditions as well. And then this summarizes the transportation benefits with this application, the 2 new traffic signals, as well as the various capacity and traffic calming improvements that we're proposing. Access management is key, reduction of the 14 access points to the 3 that we are proposing, which much more efficiently addresses site access. Increased pedestrian connectivity, which also includes the WNOD trail accommodations, making sure we take advantage of that connectivity. And then TDM and parking management, very critical. We recognize that as a comment that we received from staff on a number of occasions, as well as others in the community. So the applicant is serious about engaging experts to address TDM and parking management. And then lastly, on-site bicycle parking, as well as shuttle service. And before I close my little part of the presentation, I do want to say that when we went to this process, we really went with the intent not just to mitigate our site, but really to address some long-standing traffic issues from the community standpoint. And we are engaged, we continue to be engaged with the community and explore additional ways to not only mitigate our traffic, but really to improve the roadway network, even over those under existing conditions. So I will turn it over to the next.
Can you go back to the traffic light? You could do it there. You could do it there.
Okay.
No.
One more. Sorry.
That one. Lindy.
Oh, thank you. Oh, we were discussing up here where exactly the traffic lights are.
I apologize if I was not clear about that. We are proposing 1 new signal at the West Street and Park Avenue intersection, which is the northernmost one at the top of our site. And that, I don't have, let's see if I have an arrow here. Yeah, here we go. This is 1 signal here.
Okay,
And then the second signal is here.
there.
We have performance results. We just didn't show them on the slide here for brevity. But yeah, we are proposing a second traffic signal
And
at this location.
And the one at West and Broad.
This is the existing. This is the existing.
That's the
signal.
existing.
Exactly.
So there's 2 additional.
Right.
We couldn't
exactly.
make up our minds whether they're a total of 4 or 3.
Oh, I apologize for not being clear. Thank you.
okay, now you're saying that if it's so for example, at Northwest and Grove, it's existing as a C, whoops,
Sorry.
and it's going to an E, or it's the other way around?
I apologize again for not being clear. The first value in these figures represents the AM peak hour, and then the second value represents the PM peak hour. So what you see is that for that particular intersection, the level of service is C in the morning, and then today is E in the afternoon.
Okay.
Well, that has a lot to do with traffic. PM time, trying to make a left turn.
Correct. That is that intersection is a stop control.
And that's today's.
That is today.
These are today's. Okay, fine. We understand. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on traffic too. At the area where you have the number 7, the entrance into the site, can you describe how the traffic flows into the project?
Is it right
Does
turn
it go
only?
into the parking?
Are you talking about this intersection here?
Yes.
Okay. That is a full movement intersection, signal control, so all movements would be permitted, left turns and right turns into and out of the project.
And once you enter the property, where do you go? If you can.
If you don't mind, maybe I'll defer that to the,
Oh,
to
okay.
the architect,
All right,
who can explain the
Well,
interior.
so here's the thing. We have, I think, probably each, well, all right, keep going. So the thing is, I think everybody probably has 20 minutes of questions in and of themselves, so we're happy for you to do the presentation, but I don't, but go ahead, go ahead.
All right, Jeff Whitman, thank you.
Or entertain questions as
Yeah,
we go.
you feel free to ask questions as we
This will
go.
be the plan itself, and it might be a good time to start asking the questions.
And I am the last speaker, so. I'm going to start at the bottom of the plans here. This is starting from the lowest level of the project here. We've got a structured parking below grade to the eastern side of the project. Masonry would split the two. The dashed area to the left side there would represent our area designated for the below-ground theaters. And that actually, you'll see that on the next slide as well. We have we're going up another level to a P1 parking level, which is this mirror of the same floor level below, structured parking to the east. The heights required for the theater are going to require a 2-story volume in there, in that theater space to the left. The grade on the project slopes from the upper, where the Northwest Street bends, from that corner all the way to the eastern edge of the site, drops 14 feet. So we've got an extra spot over here on the eastern side, so that's why you're seeing just a partial plan right now of the retail along that side. And there will be actually structured parking, which to the west of this would actually be below grade. To the east of it would be exposed, just because due to the grade changes. Yes, yes. So as I'll go to the next one here. So if I am, well, let me get to the plan here real quick. So everything designated here in blue is retail. Everything designated in the light blue is an office component. Everything designated in the orange is a hotel component, and everything designated in the yellow is an apartment component. We have.
Just getting back to my original question. If I enter from Broad Street, on this plan, I'm not going into the parking structure, right?
You are, yes, you are. You actually enter at this level. You are even
Right.
with the parking garage
So
there.
this is the lower level parking plan. I just wanted to make sure that I was reading it correctly.
No, that's correct. You are correct.
You can go straight into the parking structure.
Okay,
That's at the same elevation.
all right.
However, the one question we had with the other traffic was you've got that median strip. So it's going to be coming, going west is the only time you can turn in there?
That's a full circle. The median strip does not go down to that.
It
To that
doesn't?
entrance.
If you put the aerial up,
So there would be a,
okay.
there we go.
The median
Let's see if we
stops,
can get, oh, never mind.
you see where Mason Lane is?
Yeah.
Median goes just past Mason Lane, so, and that's why Mason Lane is right out on.
Is there any way of, I know I've asked this often on Route 7, Broad Street, but having a left-hand turn arrow
You're talking about where?
at the 7 where you got that?
We're actually contemplating that. That came up at the CACT. And,
Because otherwise, we'll have traffic backed up all over the
I think
place.
that's correct. And so we're going to work on doing a left-only turn lane there. We've got a preliminary design that indicates to us that will work.
I think we should have
we would
left-hand
include
turn
that in our
arrows all
plan.
the way down Broad.
Keep going. Okay, and to continue as well, we have the Mason Lane running north-south on the project. We have the Market Square, which is now doubled in size. Structured parking to the eastern side of the project, which is at grade at that location. This is going to go up a half of a level. I won't say half a level. It's really a mezzanine level where we would occur at the retail level podium structure. Structured parking, we have a small office component over on the eastern side of the project. Now we start on the second floor, which is really above our concrete structure, which is going to start our apartments. Everything identified in yellow is apartments.
and the orange section there is identified as the hotel. And we have our parking structure over on the northeast side of the project. Third floor, it's the same thing. If you notice that between the third floor and the second floor, we've stepped back the parking garage along Park Avenue. That is what we were referring to earlier with the step back, what David mentioned earlier with the step back at that location. Same thing happens on the fourth floor. It's identical. The fifth floor is really a half structure of parking on the back side of the parking garage. The rest of the program remains the same. And then there is no structure at this parking structure at this elevation. We have apartments and hotel only at this location. This is a view looking down Park Avenue. Everything you see here, we have the local retail tenants located underneath the parking structure. We've got our 9-foot step back at the third and fourth floors of the parking structure. We have the parking above that. We have apartments over on the right side of the project, and we have retail at the corner there. You might notice that the trees are ghosted right now. It became problematic to try to show you the building with the trees lining the front there, but that is an accurate depiction of our intentions for the trees lining this location. So we ghosted them just for reference only.
What is the setback?
The setback of the building front is about it's around 23 feet, 24 feet, I believe.
But you've also got that little stairway with,
Correct.
so it's how far, is that?
That
10 then?
that is within the 14-foot setback that's currently there. I want to say it's 16 feet because I think it's a 7-foot sidewalk. And then again, the parking garage steps back another 9 feet at the third and fourth floors above there. There's a view looking down Northwest Street, looking down Mason Lane. You can see the apartments to the left, the parking structure to the left of that, the hotel component as it wraps the corner there on the right side of Mason Lane, retail lining both sides of that as well. The ghosted trees in front, again, it's the same motif. There's a view looking down West Broad Street. We have apartments lining the entire length of that facade. We have retail lining the entire lower level of Broad Street facade. And you'll see it on the next slide, we actually have an office component slid in between the apartments and the retail level on the eastern side of the project. Again, the ghosted trees and the ghosted folks in there are there for reference only.
So what's this building height?
This building height is, I think, 82 feet.
So this is 82 feet, and then if you go back on Park, what was it?
It's the same height.
No, to the left. Whoa, right there.
Yes, yeah, correct.
No.
The first,
So, okay, well, let's do it here. So at the top of the parking garage, it's 55.
correct.
And that's 82.
That's correct.
Okay, fine.
Yep. And again, this is at the 85 feet. We also have our corner entrance there as well for our retail. This is looking westbound on West Broad Street, where I'd mentioned that we have the apartment level above. We have retail lining the entire length of Broad Street, and then it's that piece that's on the eastern side there also slides in an additional level of office space. The view looking down Grove Avenue, where we have our hotel piece at the corner there. You can see the residential unit over on the left side, and we have our residential unit to the right of that as well. Our pedestrian-only breezeway connects the Market Square to the corner, activates the corner. We also have retail lining the entire first floor or ground floor level of the entire project here as well. So view looking inside the Market Square, looking back out towards Grove Avenue. You can see it through the breezeway there. We have our hotel on the right side there with our exterior outdoor amenity for the hotel folks. Retail lining all sides of the Market Square. And again, we've ghosted the trees. We've ghosted the trees to... I did. Ghosted the trees along the on the Mason Lane here as well. There's a view looking back towards...
Quick question for you.
Looking northwest. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I notice you don't have any balconies in this project. Is that a conscious decision to...
No, we
eliminate
have
them?
some strategically located right now, but we haven't identified exactly where they're going to go. There's probably going to be more. I mean, I'm guessing, it's going to be a lot of that's going to be depicted by the residential partner that we have on board right now. They'll probably dictate the percentage of that, and it'd be kind of guessing at this point in time. But you can kind of see a few of these. We've kind of just shown a few on the inside here as well.
On the inside, but how about on Broad Street?
We don't know yet. Again, it's going to be a question of the percentage of the number of balconies they want to try to use.
I mean, just a note, it makes the facades look really flat.
Yeah, everything's
Without the
very
balconies?
flat.
Without the balconies. Yeah.
Understood. And yeah, we took a guess initially here of the number of balconies, and we kind of just tried to place them as best we could, but it's really going to end up depending upon what the unit mix is going to turn out and what the residential partner is going to probably be advocating.
A follow-up question, so we really don't know what the architecture is going to look like yet.
No, you do.
You do?
Yeah, this is it. The only thing we don't know specifically is the balconies, as you're suggesting.
Because, well, on the Broad Street side, it was just very flat.
Well, did we get these renderings? I don't remember seeing that in our package.
They are not. The renderings are not in that package.
Okay, so,
Correct.
so you know the architecture down to building materials?
Yes.
Well, no.
Well,
We don't.
The site, those details get decided at the site plan. We've been to the AAB once, we have to go again. That Wednesday night is when we go to the AAB. So this is going to be presented to the AAB. It's the concept that's going to be discussed. But this is the ongoing dilemma about the level that you are reviewing this at is the conceptual level. And it's at the
Well,
site
okay,
plan,
in the interest of
so-
time, let's just cut this off. So this is what I would say generally. So I think there's been a lot of, no pun intended, there's been a lot of water that's flown through this creek so far. You know, generally speaking, I don't think we will necessarily speak with a common voice, but you know, most of the time, if you know the architecture, we see those renderings. I think that's fair to say. I don't think I'm going out on a limb with that. I'm happy to discuss and get into our process at great detail. But for the most part, if you know the architecture, if you know, particularly as it relates to Park, and I would say Broad, generally, we have a pretty good sense of those when someone goes through this process. So I don't think it's fair to say that we're here just to talk about the concepts, which we're about to get into. Go ahead.
Okay. This was the view, again, this is the view looking back northwest at the Mason Lane and also through the Market Square. Again, retail lining the streets, ghosted folks. Example of sort of bulk plane diagram that we had back in the January 30th submittal relative to where we are today. The bulk plane of the January 30th submittal was approximately what was allowed by what's under the 17.5 degree ordinance at the time was 5 stories. We also, as David alluded to earlier, with that we've actually removed a level of parking off of that, and we've stepped it back to increase that bulk plane to about 29 degrees. A couple renderings of what we had back in the January facade. We also have, again, just a sort of a depiction of showing how the massing has been pushed back and been broken up, at least in height, and it's also with the reduction. Rotating the parking garage has also helped us with allowing us to push it back and also allowing us to maximize the number of parking with limited or with less of an impact on Park Avenue as well. Another image is, again, this is a Spectrum building, just to kind of give it some context. We actually have the building itself is actually 14 feet from the curb line. It's 55 feet of a flat wall along the facade there, where we're actually pushed further back, and we have a step back at 35 feet.
Can I ask a question? You don't have to go back to the parking thing, but we've had problems in the past with some of our parking garages.
Okay.
We now have what we consider a perfect parking garage over at North, or what are we calling it? Gateway, Northgate?
Northgate?
Northgate. I mean, that's the sizes of the parking pretty darn good and without the poles. But in many of our other parking garages, we have trouble with the width of the parking places and the poles. Have you, you know,
These are
would like
designed-
some facts and figures and some comparisons of, like the Flower Building is dreadful, Pierce's, well, Spectrum's pretty bad too.
Right, it's tight.
But, you know, it's just, if you're going to have a parking garage, it should be usable.
Right. No, we have, we've designed, at least the parking spaces are all shown at 9 feet wide, and we're also contemplating right now of going to a precast parking structure, which would eliminate the intermediate columns instead of a poured in place. But we're still navigating that right now. But each of the parking spaces are 9 feet wide, which I don't believe, I'm not sure. I know that I've driven in the Spectrum, that's pretty tight.
Yeah, it's
I've got a
really
small
far
car,
too
and
tight.
it's hard to park in there. I understand that.
9 feet wide is a good.
Yeah, that's what we would use. That's what we would use out in you know, a flat surface lot.
Because we've gotten lots of criticism on parking garages
Understood.
from ourselves, too.
And the parking's going to be very, very important to the tenants in the project to get it right. We want to have sizable spaces and sizable drive-outs and convenience.
Okay, question and answers. Melissa?
Okay. I guess my biggest concern with this, and I know that the anchor, the second anchor came from council, and I know that the original idea of a theater did come from the community, although I only saw one person's comment about the theater. I didn't see that many other, well, not a few people who said that sounded like a good idea. I'm concerned about the theater only because if it doesn't do well, it's really hard to take a theater space and turn it into something else. You know, if you have a restaurant come in, it doesn't do well, and that happens all the time. Restaurants turn over, sometimes you have 2 or 3 turnovers till you get the right restaurant. And so, you know, while I understand why the theater has been added, my feeling is that a lot of ways, we'd be better off without the theater. We could bring down the size of the building a little bit, maybe bring down the units a little bit, make it just fit in the neighborhood a little bit better. I don't know, how confident are you that a theater product would do well there? Because I think that would be the disaster for this project.
The long term.
We're very confident in the theater. We've got all of the major theater companies looking at this site, and they have done substantial research and have analyzed this layout and this design, and they think they do extremely well here. And we think that they would do extremely well here.
Okay, because
So it's not like we're pushing a theater and hoping, you know, with not very strong confidence that it'll be successful. All of the major companies are really vying to get in here. So I think that's a strong indication of how well a theater can do here in this kind of design and environment.
now, is there still some type of tax relief involved with the theater that we were hearing about before first reading? Is that still part of this package?
We are talking to the city about having some participation in their admissions tax to help with the theater and
Is
the
that
cost of
because-
putting in the theater.
Yeah, I was going to say. Right. Right, yeah, it was just in there from the past.
Right.
They would increase that. There's still a discussion of whether there would be a pop-off or the city, whether there would be a participation number.
Okay. Well, it's just that when you hear that, you just wonder if that means that it just makes the theater seem more shaky, like it needs some kind of subsidization. And I guess that's, you know, being subsidized. I guess that's the one thing I would make sure that the theater companies, like how much does that add to a ticket price? How does it affect their ability to do it? I just say this because, you know, occasionally I go down to Mosaic and they have the Angelica down there, which is a smaller theater, and it seems virtually empty most of the time I'm there. And so of course, I know they have a lot of units that are still in construction, and maybe when all those units come on, it'll be more vibrant. But the restaurants are vibrant there, but the theater seems a little empty. So I'm just, you know, like I
Well,
said, I'm concerned with that product.
Angelica is not as prominent in the first-run movies
Right.
segment as the other theaters. So they're going to do less in volume than the theaters who are running first-run movies. All of the theaters that are looking at this project are looking at an urban design, and they will have first-run movies.
Yeah, I
So
think
it'll be
that
a
was-
premium product.
That was my concern, because I thought we were hearing more of a kind of an artsy theater like Angelica, but if it's first run, I
Yeah.
think that has a better chance. I'm still don't
Agree with
feel
you on
like your commitment to LEED is really solid. I know that there's talk of having, like this bond, and if it doesn't fail, I would rather see you guys talk more positively, like we're going to get LEED, and instead of like, I just like to see the LEED part of it be more solid and more like you really are committed to it. And LEED, and then the other problem I have is ADUs. I really much would prefer to have units than the cash. But I know we don't have a report from the staff on that, and I guess if the staff that deals with affordable housing was okay with the cash, I might be okay with it, but right now, no, they're not. Okay, well, I want to see what their opinion is of it, but my general opinion is that we're better to have the units.
Okay.
Anyway, those are my questions, and
Can I
My
refer
issues.
to that?
go ahead.
The ADUs. Yeah, I didn't refer to that meeting since I knew it was going to be coming up. But the meeting with the affordable housing did occur, and we had a representative there. And then we had a special meeting that Friday, another meeting to really discuss things among ourselves. There was quite a concern about the units versus cash. First of all, we've got a policy that's at minimum. It really is minimum. 6% is, and so there's some concern about the percent of the number of units, and also at the percent of, what is it called, AMI? And then there was a lot of discussion about the cash, too, so whether, to go that way or go that way. But the feeling was, at this point, if you start taking cash from developers, we will never get any units within any development. And then we'd, with cash, you'd be looking at perhaps doing a building, and that's not our philosophy, to have a building of all ADUs. It would have been, had we gotten the affordable housing for the elderly, the senior citizens over there that got messed up. So we would have had that. But there was a lot of discussion, and as far as the value of it, because it comes to a little bit under $2 million. And so it did go into a memo that we should have had here tonight, and it's not.
Okay, so we'll get that memo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I even asked to have it emailed to me today.
Okay. Ruth had a quick,
Yeah, I have a quick question about your comments about the second anchor. It seems to me, Mr. Lasso, when you were giving the points about having a second anchor, you said that that was passed in the first reading approval in August. That was last year. But we have since had a second first reading.
Right.
And that too was approved. But while I wasn't able to go to the meeting, I'm not absolutely positive, so maybe Mr. Fuller can help us on this. It seems to me that what was passed did not have a second anchor requirement in that particular language, that the amendment to put that in was proposed by Nader, and then the motion that was voted on did not have that amendment in it. So is it, it seems to me that that's out of the picture.
No, it's not out of the picture.
I know it's not out of the picture in reality, but it seems to
before
me
you
that
answer,
didn't pass.
before you answer, I actually was going to ask Gary if he could sort of clarify this for us, because and I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I don't. Can you speak to this point a little bit?
Can you state it for me, just so I understand clearly?
Well,
I know I was all over the place
Yeah.
with my question. I wasn't at the meeting, but my reports from the meeting and what I've seen on the Granicus video is that there was a motion put forward to approve first reading. There was a whole bunch of discussion. Mr. Baruch offered an amendment that included having tenants, signed papers saying that they were going to have tenants. One was the major tenant of the hotel, and the second one was the theater. And I don't know if those two were mentioned as such, as a hotel and a theater, if they were just two anchor tenants. I can't remember what the amendment was. But then, one of the council members said, let's just vote on the first motion. And the amendment was not put on that. So I'm just wondering where that puts us with regard to requiring a second anchor. Does that make it any clearer?
Yeah, okay, I got it now. You're correct in that there was a motion by Nader, and it didn't make the final motion and vote. And so the resolution that staff drafted for the second reading, which was approved, indicated a theater at a certain number of seats, and it indicated a hotel at a certain number of rooms. So the resolution that you have in the package refers to, and that's the action item that you do for the overall project.
You mean from the one from August of 2014?
No, there's a new one now. So in other words,
But they haven't passed that. They didn't vote on that.
yes, they did.
When did they do that?
They did that on that same night. So in other words, at first reading.
I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to
Well,
go back and see that
At
again.
first reading, there was a couple documents. There was an ordinance for the rezoning, there was a resolution for the comp plan amendment, and there was a resolution for the special exception. All those were referred to board and commissions.
Right.
The first reading is only relevant to the ordinance for the rezoning. And then the other two are resolutions that are just referrals.
Okay.
But we sort of package them, we refer to them as a first reading, sort of as a package. So that's a little confusing, but technically, the resolutions are just referred to board and commissions, and that's the final action document that you vote on at the time of the rezoning and second reading. You've got these other two resolutions, and so
And is this language that was crafted by our city attorney?
this was a language crafted by staff and then reviewed and commented on and edited by our city attorney, yes.
Well, I'd like to clarify that,
Okay.
because I asked at our last meeting exactly what we were, I'm glad we're having this conversation in a work session, because my question was what exactly we were going to look at as far as our approvals. And my understanding, which I could be wrong, is that we are not bound by two anchors. We could obviously not totally redo this project, but that we are not, that's not a contingent part of this deal.
To Nader it is.
Well, but Nader is one vote. I mean,
Right.
so that it's conceivable to me that there are a whole litany of challenges of getting through the city council. And it's conceivable to me that there are contradictory opinions on the city council. But as it relates to the planning commission, we are not bound by two anchors, or three anchors, or one anchor.
I mean, at this point, the resolution can change before the final vote.
The second reading resolution.
The second reading resolution can change in between, and it usually gets some little edits anyway, but it could change significantly if the plans change.
Right.
I mean, right now, the resolution is reflecting the plans that were presented at first reading and the first referral.
Correct.
Last month, and so it reflects those only. If the plans change, the VCs change, then that resolution would get edited accordingly to reflect that final, what's before you for an actionable vote.
So on June.
So it's flexible is what I'm saying. We're not,
Yeah.
right now, these are being presented as part of the package that's before you.
We're just trying to clarify things because we'd
Well-
like to know exactly what we're voting on when we actually have to vote.
We'd like to, yes, so we'd like to clarify what we're actually voting on. I will tell you that there are certain probably planning commissioners and other citizens in Falls Church who are going to view this theater totally different if there is some form, any form of an admission tax or tax-related subsidy to this project. That sort of alters the landscape fairly significantly.
Yeah, I mean, there is, the economic development staff, we can have them comment directly on this for you. I'm going to basically say that we have, I think, the tax in place. We just don't have a theater right now, so we don't collect that money. And so once a theater does come, that money would be collected, and in this case, some kind of structure along the lines of the BJ's, where for a certain period, that would be part of the subsidy. So in other words, we're not even collecting that money now because we don't have a theater, but we got it on the books
Well, we
already.
have the State Theater.
Well,
but
this is not comparable to the BJ's deal because there was a series of trade-offs that led to that deal. This is different. This is saying we have to have 2 anchors, but oh, by the way, one of them will be subsidized. That's a totally different. It's totally different. That's a totally different series.
Correct. You're correct, but
And
that's what's
we are
being mimicked after.
We're a little bit at the 11th hour, in my opinion, to be having this discussion. But so if you could just check on like what that actually means.
Okay, I mean, that's a fair question, but that's my basic understanding of it right now is how it's being discussed, so, and what the.
It's not, the first reading, which happened on the 13th, had a motion to it,
13th of August or 13th of April?
13th of April.
So that was the
Just
second
had-
first reading?
Yes.
Okay.
So after January 30th, there were a number of changes, most importantly, the Park Avenue modifications. We were asked to submit revisions to the application, showing all those changes, to revise the letter of justification, to essentially resubmit. That was done. And so the next issue was, does it require a new first reading? And the city attorney and the staff asked us to proceed to a new first reading. So the council held a new first reading on the application dated April 8th. That was the date that it came in. And so the hearing included all of the materials for April 8th. The staff always prepares for the city council a staff report which includes a motion, and the motion included this April 8th plan. In other words, the motion was to give it first reading and to move the April 8th resubmission on to the boards and commissions for their review and comment. The April 8th submission includes a movie theater. Now, at the public hearing, the question came up from Council Member Baruch. He had about 4, then it became 5, and then there were several conditions he wanted to put on that motion in addition to what was before the City Council. And after a lot of discussion, they chose not to add those conditions. So you came back to the underlying motion, which was a motion to refer on to the Planning Commission the April 8th resubmission, which includes a movie theater. Now, you are the body that reviews all of the planning issues and the comp plan issues. The issue of of what to do about the admissions tax is not before you. The council hasn't even taken it up yet. The manager hasn't decided where he stands on it. All we've done is had a discussion with the city staff, really, and with some members on various boards and commissions, that the cost of including a movie theater is extremely expensive. And so that was taken care of largely by having the above-grade parking facility, as we talked about. But that doesn't cover all of the cost. And the cost kept rising. There was an additional traffic light that got added. There was a request for additional money for a park. The list kept growing. And we have had to say, and so and what you have before you in your package is voluntary terms and concessions, which are probably going to change depending on how this plan works out. What will be the ultimate commitment to the schools, to the parks, we were asked, for the first time ever, a developer has been asked to make a contribution on a per capita basis to the library. We're willing to do that. But something's got to give.
And I think we
And
recognize that. I
that-
only
there it
brought
is.
up the emissions tax because from a planning perspective, I was worried about the long-term viability of the theater because the last thing we want is to have empty space that can't be turned into something else. And a theater, like I said, a theater can't just be turned into a restaurant easily.
That is
So
exactly right.
So that emission tax was only, I was always concerned because to me that was, I was questioning, is this a viable thing? It's good to hear that you guys have national chains interested in it. That makes me feel like it's maybe more viable.
And if you just indulge me for a minute, I want to try to put this in the bigger picture. You've just gone through, and you all have been a participant in setting the budget for the city. And you sweated blood over $350,000. $350,000, and people were ready to punch one another. I did that multiple times 20 years ago. Some things don't change. I delivered a budget actually when I was acting city manager in 1988, saying at that time, the only way this city is going to get to a level of sustainability is if we can start welcoming development and offering to have development occur and let it occur. Well, not much happened. In 1988, recessions came and went, and it's been very difficult. We turned a corner, in my humble opinion, around the year 2000, 2001, when you started for the first time to entertain mixed-use developments by special exception. Most people have forgotten. We put into the ordinance in the late 80s actually a by right provision in all of the B districts that allowed multifamily development provided you have the first floor as commercial. By right, there was no special exception. Nothing happened. Nobody took us up on it because our reputation was we're not interested. We're too difficult to deal with. We have too many requirements. We second guess. Nothing happened. But the Broadway did come forward, and it got built, and it wasn't perfect by any stretch. It's got a lot of deficiencies, but on the other hand, it did get built, and it sent a signal that is still being heard, which is we're open for business. And Falls Church has been rediscovered, and it began coming in. And each project that you all reviewed as a planning commission, you got better, and you got better, and you got better products. And people, you began to develop, and you now have a series of expectations, is what I would call it, for purposes of the community benefits. That's why we set that out separately for tonight. We did that when I was working with Tinnerhill. We gave you a separate chart. We tried to put a number on what the community benefits were in addition to just tax revenues. And so we've tried to do that here. And so now you've come to a next step. You have for the first time achieved a site. The Diener site, the old Diener site, the Duckpin Bowling Alley site, we represented the sellers in that transaction, 6 acres. That was the biggest site in the city of Falls Church, but it was all in one ownership, owned by a husband and wife who were in their 90s, and they were finally ready to get rid of it. But it was only one parcel. Here, the Spectrum Development Company has worked for over 2 years to pull together 15 different parcels, multiple owners, held it together. Mr. Shreve is at his wit's end. He's ready to throw in the towel and just let it. I don't know what he'll do, honestly. I don't think he knows what he's going to do. He tried to rezone this years earlier, just one of the residential pieces, just so he could have a better parking lot for his building where Shreve McGonigal got relocated. That was his first plan. Let me have more parking for my customers, and he was turned down. That never happened. And so sort of the attention that's been paid to Park Avenue has been long-standing. It's, at one instance, it's very intense. And on the other hand, it's neglect. Why is that area considered so sacrosanct? Look what you did behind the Spectrum and how the transition. I'm not criticizing it. It does work. I know people who live there in those townhouses, and they're very happy. But that's a transition. And now on Park Avenue, 2 houses, maybe 3, directly across the street. It should have been rezoned to T1 or T2 decades ago. But it wasn't. Why? Nobody really seems to know. I remember talking about it decades ago. I think the answer is, well, because it was sandwiched between the church and between what was then a fairly vibrant commercial area, it was just simply, nobody paid attention to it. And so here we are with a development that is world-class. We've been to the iPic movie theater in North Bethesda. That's where I visited recently with Peter and Dick. We should talk about getting you out and seeing what we're talking. We're not talking about a multiplex.
I appreciate your soliloquy. But let me cut you off in the interest of time, because people really do have a lot of questions about it. Let me sort of speak only for myself and not the Planning Commission. You know, the money's important. The community benefit's important. And I realize what has happened in the last 2 years with the City Council. But our role, which we take very seriously, and I think we have done a pretty good job, is to get better. So we've had some, quite frankly, maybe, you know, foul tips here and there with some of these things. I think there are some parts of the Spectrum we would revisit, certainly lessons learned with the Byron, some of which we've gone over with consultants and the staff, et cetera. And I think from all of that, we're going to try and get the best project we can. This discussion was not originated by your original comments, but your original comments to me touch on exactly the challenge we have with a project of this magnitude in that location, which is you have continued to add units and add units and add units and add to the site itself, and all of that is magnifying the complications we have in this location, right? This specific location. This project, if this project were at Tinner Hill, this would be a completely different conversation. But at that location, there are certain issues raised, like a 55-foot parking deck. So you're not going to convince us that we shouldn't ask these questions. There is no soliloquy you can give that we're not going to try to get to those questions. But let's move on, because we have, I know, a lot of people with a lot to say.
Okay, if I may.
Who's going, Waffle or me? I don't care.
Oh, okay. All right, I just wanted to commend the team on the design of the project itself in terms of the interior of the project, and then I'll talk about the exterior. It works on the inside. I think conceptually everything that you have here really works, and I like it. I also like the market, the performance area, etc. Now, going on the outside of the project, I think the areas that we have some issues with, and I think it was you who rightly pointed it out, is Park Avenue. Now, I like the fact that Park Avenue has a retail component, because I think it makes the facade more transparent, and you don't have a blank wall that you're walking across. Question that I have for you is, if you can go back to the yeah, I know. Is there any way in which we can bring the facade down to the street level? I know there's you have those stairs up there, and it slopes down. But is there any way in which we can break up that monolithic piece in front of it, and then bring out some tables so that, we could, the cafe can, or is your intent to have tables in front of it?
The sidewalk is 7 feet, so it's a little snug, but it's not to say that, someone wouldn't try to put the tables out front. And again, it's a lot of it's going to depend upon the end user. We're kind of assuming a couple of the existing tenants there, one of which may be an eatery of some sort, which would accommodate that. But if the other one were to be a bike shop, again, just
Okay.
that'd be but duly noted. I mean, I think that there are some opportunities there because we were trying to massage the facade of that with the retail bays. So we have some push and pull with the retail bays, as you can kind of tell that the retail bays actually project out, which I think help with the overall. I don't want to create a big wall there, obviously. But again, with that impact, I could go in, and it may do the same thing to give you some of that
I think the staff
space.
comment was that the retail wasn't working. But I actually like the retail on this side because I feel like if I lived on Park Avenue and I was walking down, I would like to see some retail, some activity happening, some tables, little cafes along that area. So
And to that point, these are, if you look on the plan, these are not large spaces. They're really shallow, so it's not going to attract a big vendor of any sort. And again, the rents are such that at this location, it seemed to make sense with retaining a lot of the tenants that are currently reside on the site. So a lot of that sort of local activity, the idea that this is a local establishment currently, and that transition may make a little more sense, as you're saying as well. It might be an easier transition.
now, the other thing that I have, which is the last comment, is that in going through the staff report, there was a lot of concerns that I didn't see being addressed here. Are we going to have them addressed by June 1? When we...
on the staff? Yes, we will.
When
Yes,
we have
will.
our meeting with, our work session with the city council?
Yes. We will have those addressed.
Oh, is the public hearing? When is
The work
city
session will be
council
before that.
meeting?
June 1, it was going to be May, but it was moved to June 1. And I wasn't, let me just take a step back. Not only was I not trying to cut off the discussion, but as I began the meeting, we would actually like an additional work session with you. We would very much like to roll up our sleeves and sit down and go over these issues, get the tracing paper out, and make sure we hear you and react to you the way that you want and you deserve. So if I made you think that we weren't going to do that, then I'm wrong, and I apologize. So that's my mistake, but we want to work with you. We need your guidance. We have got to stop making changes and start finishing up. And it needs to be with your help, and we're asking for it.
So, in that sense, are you making a commitment that by June 1 you'd have addressed those comments when we
Yeah,
meet?
we will.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Gary, how do you feel about that?
Just a comment. Yeah, we're running out of time here. So, 3.5 weeks from now, you're supposed to take final action on this. 2.5 weeks, we've got to write the staff report on it. If we get a new application, it takes us 3 weeks to review it. And then,
Why?
well, in terms of changes, we've got to review anything that's, so, we were hoping this work session would be one where we sort of vetted the issues. They could go back and finalize them. And so we may have to schedule an additional work session to sort of work through some of these things.
Well, help me understand.
Or extend the June 1st, which would extend.
What's the magic of June 1st?
The second reading date was set for July 13th, and in order to basically get the board and commission recommendations, including yours, packaged for the council, then have a joint work session to vet those and give them final guidance for final changes for the middle of June for an action date. That was the schedule.
Well,
And that was a very condensed, short schedule.
and my opinion was it was not a good schedule, and I didn't agree to it. And I still don't agree to it. I don't really want to have one public hearing and take final action. And I think that I have general support with that. And I think we were going to amend the schedule.
And that's your prerogative, because you're a mandatory recommendation of the council on this. So we can work with you to.
I would like to have a public hearing and not take final action. I think that would be the issue. So if we could have one more meeting following that. And then I'm happy to have, I'm not happy, but I think it would be great to have another, I mean, let's not go with great, but I think it would be okay to have another work session and be fine. But I never agreed that it was a good idea, and I know that I think we're unanimous in saying that we wanted to have a public hearing and then take final action. That was never we never acquiesced.
And I mean, what you can do is, for instance, on the public hearing date, let's just say, for instance, June 1st, you could provide guidance and not take final action. And then your guidance then serves as interim comments, then waiting to see what the final plans are before you make have a final public hearing on it. So, yeah.
No. We have a public hearing, and then, I mean, there will be issues that come up in the public hearing. I mean, what we did, actually, the best example of this is what we did with Rushmark, because we had a public hearing, and which was excellent, really. And everyone was pretty focused, and it was pretty specific. And we sort of threw in our recommendations after the public hearing, and then the following meeting we took action. And there were several issues that were sort of resolved in that. I think it was 3 weeks because there was a vacation or something. 2 weeks. No. We had open issues from the public hearing which were resolved. So yes, we did defer.
So we can work with you on a schedule. This was a schedule that we had set up for the purposes of keeping this thing moving along. So.
Is that it?
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that, because when going through all this, having this work session and then a public session with a decision, I just couldn't see us handling that. And when frankly have never seen this many unresolved concerns from staff ever. So I think we really need to be working on those and make sure that they are resolved, because I took a look at this and said, oh my gosh. A couple of things. While that's up, while that picture's up, be careful of that little strip there. You might be having yourself a problem like they have at the Broadway. Don't do it. Use outside and the ability to get into the businesses, that colonnade and everything. I know there's no colonnade here, but the access to the buildings are better from street level. And, yeah. And that was a disaster. And it still is proving a disaster to leasing.
Oh, right, okay.
Over there. So before that go over. Dave, so much that you said was so true. And we had some growth going, then we shut down in '08. But I still think we're making great headway on getting some really good projects. I mean, just amazing projects. But I will give you all a lot of sympathy in one way, is that I think you've been the victim of so much push-pull that I've ever seen. And, just for instance, the neighbors didn't like the condos. You got rid of the condos. Now they don't like the parking garage where they could have had the condos. Now they say they want some condos or single-family houses over there. So trouble is with all the hearings and all people's ideas come in, is that sometimes they don't really get what they think they're going to get, and they would have preferred what they already were offered. So I have really good sympathy for you on that, and so much second guessing along the way. And I do think you have made a lot of improvements. I think that you've been working on the parking deck, because I'm glad we saw that. And the interior section, I think, is wonderful, just like Quafo said, and the design and all of that. There's some other kind of weird things that we didn't ask questions about. Is that a bridge to a pool, and is that pool being shared by everybody?
No, the pool, the
Oh,
bridge,
that's the parking garage?
that's actually the bridge for the hotel to gain access to the parking below is really
Okay,
what that
got it.
is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I was saying, what is that? And also the fact that Mill Creek, I looked them up, and they're doing the Vienna Metro site and the Mosaic. So, that's a little bit close to home that, we can see. I don't like any of the designs at the Mosaic. I think that's one of the most, never mind. I absolutely hate that architecture. And I think there's so much that you have to do architecture-wise still here. So I hope that will evolve, because it's flat-faced. A lot of us refer not to the outcome of Pearson Square, but the building, has a lot. And so did when we approved the reserve that's now going to be called the Lincoln at Titter Hill. There was a really couple weird remarks in here about condos, that you reserved the right to have condos,
The office condo?
condos or rentals.
At the office condo? At the office condo?
No, I think that's become the format now for the voluntary terms and concessions.
Oh, okay.
Is that these units can be, once, you can make it a condominium and continue to rent
But don't
them.
you have to build them differently and have documents and everything?
You don't have to. You can, anything can be a condo so long as it's separately owned. But typically,
I
if
thought there was
you're
more specifics in the building of them.
well, in other words, if this was known to be a condominium for sale, it would probably have higher end finishes. The sizes might be a little bit different. That's what Pearson Square was.
Right, and it was
Pearson
condo,
Square
and then
was-
it
right,
turned into
was
rentals.
designed as a condo. It's physically a little bit differently, but, and in the construction type?
Well, no, as you're saying, I think you're thinking of the construction type a lot of
Yes.
times. The construction type, you can do it, you can convert it with this type of structure. It's the same use from the building code standpoint. It just becomes, most folks would rather, for a condominium, would rather do a concrete structure instead of wood to alleviate some sort of
But
potential.
you can only go so far up with concrete.
Well, there's
structure.
legal issues, or not necessarily legal issues from that, but, under condominiums, when you start to go over that with a wood structure, you open yourself up to more potential issues for the homeowners saying my building leaks kind of thing, or something along those lines. Or
And
it's
the-
concrete, you don't
yeah.
necessarily have that issue.
And the Pearson Square has the right, all the paperwork in tow to go ahead and become a condo again.
Yes,
should
because
they
it was
want
built
to.
there. Andy, we skipped you before a couple
That's
of
okay.
times.
I don't mind. I have a fair number of questions, but I will ask them efficiently, and you guys can answer them efficiently if you choose. I know we don't want to dig too much on this theater subsidy, but I have a few quick questions. And I understand it's not technically part of this, but as Melissa was pointing out, I mean, people ask us about stuff, and they want to make sure that we understand what we're approving or not. So why, my understanding, the proposed subsidies, we put a tax on the ticket, call it a quarter, call it $1, whatever, and then the city gives some or all that back to you guys for some period of time. Why not just raise the ticket price? Is that because the operator gets the ticket sales and the developer would get this tax subsidy? I guess as sort of a
First,
transactional thing.
to answer your question about why does the theater company not just increase their ticket prices, that's a competitive issue.
Because the
what you
people
go
going
to-
won't notice that they're paying extra
Well, what you go
tax.
to the marketplace for a dinner plate or a theater ticket or a toy truck is a price that they provide that customer, and they're competing with other similar
Okay.
retailers for that customer on the price of the product.
All right.
Nobody competes relative to what the taxes are, and those taxes are different according to what particular jurisdiction you're in.
That's fine. And then one of the things that, this is sort of the more complicated question, because the commentary I've seen is, hey, somebody asked for the theater, so we put the theater in there, but the theater is expensive, and so we had to have more units. And I'll get to my final question in a little bit about the size. So then my question is, if we unwound all that, what are we actually talking about? If we said, hey, don't do the theater, okay, so all that stuff that you say is expensive about it, first of all, the fiscal impact study, I assume, looks at the theater, and there are different components to it. So yes, there's a theater tax that maybe we give back, but there's a bunch of overpriced popcorn that's sold that I assume has a tax on it that we would get. A theater increases the value of the property, which has property tax, which we'd get. So to me, it's a complicated math problem, I would think. To remove the theater, it would have impacts not just on your costs and therefore maybe some of the other sizing, but also presumably our fiscal impact is taken into the account that the theater generates revenue for the city. So that's the direct question is probably not answerable here, but if someone said, how does this project change if there's no theater? The things that I'd be curious about changing are net fiscal impact, both directly related to theater, but also this other question, which is, if there was no theater, could you guys build the whole thing with fewer units? Could you have more step back options on the parking deck because you wouldn't need as much parking? And how would those changes affect the overall fiscal impact? And like I said, I don't expect you to know that here. That's a lot of math, but since we're going to have another crack at this, I think if someone is going to ask you to do what could you do without the theater, those are the answers I'd want to know. Like, how does that trickle down to everything else? Because I don't think I like the theater. I think it's fine. I don't think it's as simple as get rid of the theater now instead of 340 units. There's 300 units and stuff like that. Yeah.
Very complicated question.
So you don't need to answer that one now, but that. Maybe you have something to talk about the next time we talk.
Right.
So.
It's a very complicated question. It's a good question.
Right. Well, we'd like to complicate an answer. So I'm happy for you to give us an answer.
I have a really good, well thought out answer.
Okay.
To that question.
Okay.
I'd like to give you a little prelude to my answer, and we can get into this the next time we meet, because it is complex. But I think you got to step back for just a second. Yes, as we were moving this project forward, we were asked by City Council to explore a second anchor, and that evolved into a theater would be a great second anchor. The reason that we were asked to explore a second anchor is our first anchor was a hotel, and a hotel is not traditionally a understandable anchor for a retail project. It does provide people to go to restaurants and things like that, but your traditional anchors in the retail development world, as you all probably know, are grocery stores, theaters, well-done public spaces, substantial, well-known, sizable restaurants. Or clusters of restaurants. There are ways to design a project with anchors, and the purpose of the anchor is to draw in to drive the sales of everybody else in that location. Today, you're seeing all over the country theater anchor projects. And theaters are doing very well. They're changing their models. They're bringing food. They're doing a great job bringing food in to the theaters. They are mixing first-run movies with some of the other unique showings that you can't always just see when you go out to look for a first-run movie, or that you might rent on demand at home. They're bringing some unique shows and things like that. So when we yes, and they're changing their whole seating package. You know, it's a very different experience. So the theater actually, as we started to embrace the challenge to do it, we started to look at how do we design an entertainment sense of place, which is what's happening, again, around the country. And theaters are designing smaller units, you know, with not so many screens, so that they can create a theater operation that will fit into urban projects. And those projects are doing extremely well, and the theater is actually a very important driver to the projects.
Right.
So I think when you look at Mason Row and you look at what we're trying to accomplish, the first thing we're trying to accomplish commercially is a sense of place. Why is somebody going to come to Mason Row? Because Mason Row has a streetscape that has a very pedestrian-oriented, very vibrant, interactive experience for the customer between the restaurants, between the shops, and in this case, with the theater. Theaters and restaurants complement each other extremely well. They feed the same customer that comes to the theater is also going to the restaurants on a project, and vice versa. The customer going to the restaurants is often buying tickets and going to the theater. So this whole concept, and we can spend some more time on this, we've spent a lot of time as we pursued the theater for this project, and why we were gone for so long was to figure out how to create an entertainment-oriented mixed-use project that really had the sense of place.
Right.
And we felt that it was really important to expand the public space, because as you go away from a grocery-anchored type of mixed-use project and you go in the entertainment direction, now you need the public space to really drive that engine.
Yeah.
And so we also at the same time expanded the market square.
Right.
And I think where we've headed here, although it has cost some substantial money, is a really well-designed urban place.
Yeah, and to be clear, I actually I favor the theater and the way you've packaged it with the Market Square. I'm preparing you for other people to ask you, hey, if we don't have the theater, can we have 40 fewer residential units? And I think the answer needs to be more than just, hey, the theater's great. It's got to be.
We've gotten more land to accommodate the theater and the more public space we want, which is a better amenity for the community. You know, going back to the subsidy question, the question of subsidy is not pulling income that the city has that is not uniquely being provided from the project. What we're talking about is an emission tax that the city doesn't have today, and it would have because of this particular use here.
Right.
There are other jurisdictions that have emission taxes, and other jurisdictions are initiating emission taxes, and as a matter of fact, as we said, the City of Falls Church has one. It's a matter of bringing that admission tax up to what's kind of on par with other similar cities.
And
So I don't see it as a cost per se for the city to work with us in that fashion. You know, the question is, what's the right balance?
Exactly, and that's where there are others that will negotiate that. That's not my role. I just wanted to understand that. Real quick, I noticed you guys went through that one slide that talked about the voluntary concessions and the value, and you had the second one added up to like 1.85 million. But my math, if there are 340 units with the per unit contribution, the school capital cost alone would be more like 2.5 million. I didn't know if that number factored out potential affordable dwelling units, which I don't think you make capital contributions on, or if there is my math is wrong, or if your math is wrong.
We're just responding to discussions right now with the city about how to allocate those funds.
But that, and to Dave's comment, I mean, the voluntary concessions, I understand, aren't finalized, but when we vote, we're voting on that package, right? It's not like we vote on a project and then later on the voluntary concessions change, right?
Correct.
Because that matters to me. I'm getting closer to my big final exciting question, but parking, the city has a parking code. I unfortunately missed the meeting where we got the update on that, but a lot of times people refer to not having enough parking, and they're basing it off of the code, which apparently is suspect anyway. But if I read it correctly, Paul Stoddard's report, he's actually worried about there being too much parking. So I don't know how we get to the bottom of that, but yes, it sounds like you want less parking than is required by code, but apparently some professionals think that the code requires too much parking. I guess this is another question that doesn't have a specific answer, but I worry about
Well,
this.
no, I've got a lot of answers on that, too.
Okay, great.
We are very,
That's
very concerned about parking, and we've got to get the parking right, because the parking, we have to have sufficient number of spaces, convenient spaces. We talked tonight about having spaces that are large enough so people are comfortable coming out of the garage. That's the way we're going to get the best tenants. We're trying to do a project that is of a certain level of quality, and so we're going to have to park it right. If we don't have sufficient parking, we're not going to get the best restaurants, and we're going after the best restaurants.
Okay.
The theater, we're going to have to park it so that the theater customer can get the parking space they need when they need it, and the theater company's got to be comfortable that we're providing sufficient parking, and it's got to be convenient. We're working very, very hard to get that number right. As far as the residential number, it's been suggested us to look at ways that we can through TDM and other parking management plans, reduce the requirement for parking. We're going to do a combination of things, and I'm sure as we come back and discuss this further with you all to get the parking right, we're going to take data from actual projects that are similar to what we're doing here at Mason Row and see what the parking pressures are, what the demands are, whether they've fallen short or not. Mill Creek has a number of examples that we're looking at. At the same time, we're going to work with a TDM expert and a parking planner over at Wells to really carefully study where the shared parking opportunities are so that we don't build spaces we don't need. But our first goal is to make sure we don't build one less space than what we need, because our project has to park on site. We have presented the project to all the tenants that this is a project that's parking on site. It's not a project in a city where people are going to be parking on the city streets.
All right. My last two questions are doozies. The first one is there is concern about the height, this thing right here. Great picture. And I would love for us to go out of this meeting with giving you guys some very specific guidance, because the staff report, it's too tall. What is not too tall? Because I feel like we're giving you an impossible task. You know, I have a lot of sympathy for the houses at the end of Park, because I think they're the most affected by this, and I don't want to go down some path that's going to be horrible for them, but I don't know what's reasonable. To me, this is fairly comparable to what's behind Broadway, Spectrum, whatever, Spectrum. But I know people are still concerned about this, so I might be okay with this, but I know some people here aren't. So I encourage them, after I'm done asking my questions, to be specific with you guys about what they'd be okay with, instead of just telling you they're not okay with this, because I think that's a really hard task for you guys. So that's, again, not another question, but something that
We'd appreciate that.
If I were you guys, I would ask specifics. And then the final question is the question I brought up, I think, in the first meeting over a year ago when we had this, which is some people say the project's too big. You guys say, hey, it's the size it has to be for us to make money. I think before we end this meeting, again, we need to say what that is. Is it too big? Is the FAR too big? Are the number of units too big? Is the square footage too big? What do we mean when the people who say it's too big, what do they mean? What is too big? And what would be not too big? Because I don't think it makes us any sense to have more public meetings, more work sessions, where some people say it's too big, you guys say you can't make it smaller. It's a huge waste of everyone's time. I think the size, the FAR, is okay. I mean, I think your comparison to other projects, it's a large site. You know, if we approved 2 Spectrums here, the old Spectrum, or whatever that one, it would be, you know, it's double the size. It would be way worse in size and density and all this stuff. So I'm okay with the size. You guys should be demanding of the too big crowd. Ask them what wouldn't be too big, because we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, it's like, you know, let's knock off the theater. Can we knock off 40 units? Sounds like, no, we can't. Okay, that's not going to work. So how do we get to the point where the too big crowd says what's too big, what would be not too big, so that you guys can either say, well, we can't do it, or you can come back with a design that fits. It's not too big for me. I know it's too big for a lot of people. So look, I actually didn't have very many questions, but I'm done. Thanks.
That was excellent.
I have several questions as well. Many of them have been answered already, fortunately. where to begin? Sort of to address Mr. Rankin's point, I am continually struck by how large the project is. I concur that on a ratio basis, a FAR basis, that it surpasses other projects in the city. But when I look at it, and I see a project that is in this location on 3 sides, it is just overwhelmingly large. I'm not sure where I go with that, because I agree on the ratios. It meets the requirements and it exceeds the ones we've already approved. But each time I look at it, I'm just struck by its size. I think the design has improved greatly from the very first submission. I believe at that time I had said it looked like a fortress. Now it is a much, much improved project. I am disappointed not to have seen these renderings prior to this meeting. We've stuck on this slide for the majority of this discussion, and while this is perhaps the most important corner as it relates to the community, in the way I like to view these types of projects, I really would have liked to seen these prior to we have so much paper that we reviewed to not have these 10 pieces of paper. I am somewhat disappointed by that, but I do have a better sense after this meeting. There has been a lot of improvements. Before I get into my concerns, I do want to commend you for listening to the community on many things. I do think that the increase of the market square and a sense of place, and as other commissioners have mentioned, the interior of the building has a nice feel to it when I look, and a market square, an aggregation of those types of boutique retail appeals to me, and I think will be successful and work. I'm also supportive of the theater, though my concerns I share with other commissioners that if this doesn't work, we're stuck with a space that's very difficult to reappropriate. But I think we've sort of addressed the grocery store need here in Falls Church with these new buildings, so I'm glad we're going in a different direction with another anchor. And I think your explanation about the hotel not being a standardized or a well-understood anchor is very correct. It's not something that I understand, though I do agree with the concept that dovetails very nicely with the restaurants, and that seems to be what you're pushing in your vision of what this looks like. So I am supportive of the theater, but concerned about the issues that everybody else has raised already. And I think the residential and the commercial mix are at about the right place, with notwithstanding the fact that the building is just enormous to me in the middle of the city. But I think the mix is where I would hope it would be, honestly. I have some definite questions, though, about the flow of the project, and I'm not sure I understood just because I haven't had these pictures. So I'd like to go through some of those items, and through the documentation I've read, there's been some changes that we just didn't touch upon in the presentation. So the first is I want to understand the flow of traffic on Broad into, on the slide that you had marked Route 7, it was a 7, and I just don't understand, it's sort of this half elevation. You're coming into it, and I believe, where the 7 is, just for a good reference point, I believe we're coming in at ground level, but then we're making a turn upwards to get to street level at the next entrance within the property. Is that correct?
Yes.
This intersection is very confusing to me internally.
There's 2 ways to go. Understood. There's 2 ways to go.
Yeah, and
Right here.
to that end, because of the grade change that occurs.
Understood.
We're entering at grade, and you're going to go down, I think you actually go down about a foot between that entrance, and I'm even with a structured parking garage, which is actually occurring below
So
my
when you
retail.
turn in here, this is these. You're on the 2 slides I have. When you turn in here from this entrance, are you immediately looking down the whole corridor of the parking garage?
Yes, you're looking right into the parking area, so you would know actually.
So immediately you're in the parking. But if you want to go to Mason Lane, we are making a left in
right
the
before
up.
that.
And what's that elevation change?
I believe it's about 8 feet.
So that's my sense of it. It's a very
No,
large.
it's like 9 feet. 9 feet, I think.
It's a large grade change as you come in here just to get to Mason Lane.
That's correct.
And
So
you want or do not want traffic on that road? My sense is you don't.
I think we're probably, I mean, my thoughts at least on it are is that most folks are going to come in there, it's going to be just as if you're going into a building, into a parking structure that would be either below grade or at grade or something like that. So I would envision that most folks, unless you're planning on trying to drop off at the theater or something along those lines, I probably would just assume to go right into the parking structure, park my car, and go where I want to go. I think the bypass lane, as we're calling it, is really just sort of an added convenience. If someone says, oh, by the way, well, instead of going to the parking garage, I could also check out the parallel spots, even though I know that there's another entrance up the way, at least if I decided that, you know, at the last minute I want to go check out, see if there are any parallel spots, I can do that. And that's really the intent.
We've had an internal debate about how much that road would be used.
Right.
And we have thought about some alternatives to expand the loading trash for that side of the project.
Okay, so great. You moved to my next topic, is the trash and loading dock. I've read that there are some significant changes with that. I see them on the floor plans, the plans. But I want to understand what happened on Northwest to what we see now in terms of the loading area, and there now seems to be 2 trash locations. That's the way I see it on here.
Let me see,
One is, well, it's not on this
Tell me where you're
level.
looking. You're talking about here?
So if you look at Northwest, the words Northwest Street, there is this pentagon kind of shape.
Right.
My understanding is there's trash there now.
Right, that's a enclosed trash area for rollout trash dumpsters, and the trash truck would come in at certain times parallel to this space and would roll out the trash, load it, and then drive off. There would be no backing in, backing out here.
Before the trash was located opposite the bank entrance before, and that was problematic for the backing in and out.
Right.
Right, okay, so that's a change. And this loading area, there's no parking anytime. It's just a cutout except for the trash vehicle?
The loading / trash, yes.
And this is loading for?
The retail.
Just for the retail, which they'll have. How will the loading get access to any of the retail? I hadn't considered that. So these retail locations have a front entrance, a street entrance, and then they also have an interior entrance. Where is the sort of the back of the house, for lack of a better word? Where is loading and unloading and stocking of these many retail establishments happening?
The loading and unloading is going to occur mostly on Mason Lane. I mean, that's where most of the loading is going to occur, is right on Mason Lane in those parallel spots early in the morning. There's going to be an interior, and we're working through this with Street Sense right now in the retail planning, but more than likely there will be some sort of interior corridor, so that way I will actually have an access point somewhere along the perimeter of my L-shaped building there on the left that will actually have a service corridor, which I would service my loading trash that way, and the same would occur on the pentagon-shaped building on the northern part of the site. The loading and trash are going to be behind the buildings here along the east or the West Broad Street, on the back side of that.
So is it envisioned then that each establishment is going to have 2 access points into the location, or
no, it would be
these spaces are cut in half? So there's a side that faces the interior and a side that faces the street.
Are you talking about an interior hallway?
I know you showed that slide quickly, but it was your vision for what was coming in there. I just don't remember if.
Right, and that slide actually doesn't. That was sort of the first pass at the retail concept.
It doesn't have the
it doesn't
interior
actually have
hallways.
the interior corridor. We're envisioning this to be sort of back of house is going to be an interior corridor through these buildings. In other words, that they would access it through, whether that be an access door off of Mason Lane or maybe over here in that breezeway, or we're not sure exactly where that's.
We
gonna
don't
be
want
located,
a situation where somebody is, maybe at a restaurant, is taking trash
Across Market Square.
across Market Square, and coffee grinds and things are out, and you have stains, and it's just the wrong way to go. And we've made the decision to create corridors inside, so there'll be direct access for each
That's how
tenant.
they do it
via
out at
hall-
Tyson's in the big
Correct.
malls.
Correct. Correct.
Must be having back.
There's on the, I guess it's the east side, there's another loading area. It's not on this plan, it's, I believe, the level, but it's a 1.3, I think, actually. I don't know, this was,
Yeah, it's, I know you're talking about here and here.
yeah, that, you're, I think, one level above it, but maybe not.
Where?
That's the area. It's just how that is expected to function. The way it looks on this drawing, A1.3 that I'm looking at, it looks very difficult to maneuver any sort of loading into this space.
Right. Now, the loading itself, again, there would be a loading truck through here. And again, a lot of the vendors that we're selecting right now.
Where you're pointing, I'm sorry, looks like trash on mine.
Right.
Okay.
There's trash in through here, and then there's loading in here. We're probably going to add this little space in here. Is probably going to be another loading zone adjacent to the trash as well. More than likely, the vendors that we're talking about loading and/or trash, they're going to be a smaller vendor, so chances of 65-foot trucks are probably going to be limited. At all. Not even going to happen. Again, the 65-foot trucks would probably be dedicated for your larger chains, those types of things. These are probably going to be smaller box trucks for deliveries in the back here. So they would be a 40-foot box truck
Or less.
probably, or less, to navigate this back through here.
Okay. Yeah, the loading area, as it shows on my A1.3, looks very difficult for. It doesn't look workable, honestly. The way it's got a small. It's not even just that big area. It's just the entrance is quite small, and I don't see how it works, honestly. So it sounds like you're considering that. I think it needs that area needs some work for it to just function properly, honestly. I also want to understand what the height level is at the ground floor retail. On one of these drawings, I calculated 15.1 from floor to ceiling. Do you know what because we've, at the other buildings, we've sort of usually minimum of around 16, 17 feet and preferred to almost 20 in some locations for flexibility.
And to answer that, we've got stepped floor slabs on grade because our grade steps down so much that we actually have a much taller volume over here. Again, that's why we were able to sort of slide an office space in between it, because the space between the ground floor here and where my apartment starts is about 32 feet.
Yes, I saw that. It was very large.
Pretty drastic. And the tightest spot over in here,
That's right,
floor
15.
ceiling under here was around 19, just under 19 feet, I believe, because 19 feet in here, because it was 23 elsewhere is typical, floor to floor.
Okay. Well, that's good, because I was seeing 15.1, but what the numbers you're giving me are terrific. Or I have no problem with that then. The one where I saw it was more where you were pointing, sort of the Grove Avenue area. Yeah, as Grove Avenue was intersecting. Exactly, that's where I was
This is where it gets
calculating.
tight, and you know what, you're right, actually, it is 15 feet in a small section of this, because we dropped the slab to get a taller height for our hotel first floor, or our second floor, in other words.
Okay, but it's okay that one space has 15. I just want to make sure that we are having enough flexibility on that. And going to the traffic, we saw a slide that showed the level of service without this building. Do we have a slide or similar numbers that show the improvement of service after the addition of the 3 new traffic lights? Yeah, this is the one I see. I understand the existing, but these didn't look like improvements to me. That's really where I was going with this.
For each intersection, there are 3 sets of values, and the first one, the top one, is the existing level of service, which is today's conditions. The background, which is the middle one, is basically future conditions without the project, and then the last one, the total feature, is basically future conditions with the project. So what we looked at, we evaluated a number of intersections within the study area. For purposes of the presentation, the past few meetings that we've been to, we only focused on these three, which were determined more critical. And what we determined was, for example, at this intersection, the level of service improves from D in the background to C with us, and that's really the addition of the traffic signal as well as the other improvements. And then
Realignment of the intersection.
realignment of the
and
intersection.
Turn lanes.
And then down here, you're correct. I mean, we don't change in the PM, but in the background, we do improve in the AM from E to a D. And for the rest of them, we do maintain the existing levels of service, even though we do improve the delays at a number of the situations, particularly at this intersection here.
So,
Well, the condition F on Grove Avenue is being affected again by the traffic that's coming down that intersection trying to get on Northwest Street.
Correct.
So it's hard to affect that turning movement from this side of
Well, I want to point out, too, that in the earlier version of the plan, where we did have the channelized pork chop, that total feature level service went from C/F to A/B. Because you restricted that left turns, you basically forced them to go right, which, you know, improves the level of service because there's less conflict. However, the trade-off is there's also impacted to the mobility within the neighborhood, so that, yeah.
yeah, these numbers were disappointing to me, that we would be putting in all these efforts, straightening the road, putting in traffic lights, crosswalks, and that the improvement was very minimal. I mean, the Northwest and Grove, I appreciate that you had a solution that was better. It didn't work for traffic flow, but did not acceptable to the neighborhood. So I think we're taking the right course of action. I want to listen to the neighborhood on this. But that our level of service after even whatever improvements we're making is still an F, we're at an F, an E, and a C, which I guess is the biggest improvement here. But this is just a fair improvement. I'm disappointed with these numbers, and I don't know how you change. I don't have the solution for sure, but this is not a big improvement.
I hear your concern. I do want to point out, though, we are in the traffic and transportation planning industry. You know, we look at what we consider target levels of service and what is considered desirable for an urban community. And the literature suggests that most locations have adopted level of service D really is your target for an urban condition. If you design facilities to improve over a D, you know, to the A and B level and the C level, what you're really doing is encouraging more traffic to use those facilities. So you still want to maintain a baseline, at least a target level of service, a D, and even sometimes a level of service E under certain conditions. And I'll throw out, again, you know, we're not apples to apples necessarily, but Tyson's Corner established level of service E as their acceptable threshold. So I just want to set some context in terms of, you know, what we consider improvements, what's considered more of an urban type of target level service. So.
Okay. That is helpful context. Hard for me to believe that people make their acceptable level E, but that is helpful context. And really, lastly, I want to understand a little better the tie-in with the W&OD trail. I know that you had one quick slide where you talked about a crosswalk and realigning the trail, but I'd like to get a better understanding of what's happening there.
I don't have a blow-up at the intersection, but what we're proposing to do, as I mentioned, is to realign the intersection. Right now, the curb line for West Street roughly corresponds to this dashed line here. So this is where the existing curb line is. We're actually pinching the section a bit to try and narrow that section to better the alignment, to basically shorten the crossing distance. This is something that the W&OD, the Nova Parks people, have come back to us a number of occasions and said they really want a narrow crossing because it reduces the crossing time and reduces the conflicts. So that's what we're doing. Right now, the trail itself intersects West Street roughly at this location here, so we're a bit offset from the intersection at Park Avenue. Functionally, they're two separate intersections today, and what we're trying to do is to functionally accommodate a combined crossing that is signal controlled, and which is something that the Nova Parks people have endorsed.
So I definitely see the trail being maneuvered, and it is poorly needed there, so that looks good. But how does it tie in with the crosswalks and, you know, activating that trail for this site? This is a great use, a great transportation system to the kind of retail that you're putting into this location, and it's not clear how it ties into the crosswalks to me so well.
Well, in addition to the trail, which is shown in this dark gray here, this is what we would consider to be the functional alignment of the W&OD trail after the realignment. But there are sidewalks in addition to this. I mean, there'll be sidewalks that run along the north face of West Street here, parallel to the trail. It's not clear to see in this figure, but it's shown on the plan. And that ties into the crosswalks that we are proposing on all four sides. Likewise, we do have sidewalk extending from this corner east along Park Avenue. So, you know, even though the trail is the most prominent, you know, feature in this drawing, there are sidewalks that are provided.
Since we're going to see this again, can you provide a blow-up of this exact square next time you come, so I can get a better...
Absolutely.
I think so. We've talked to them enough. So I'm done with my questions. I do want to just reiterate Ms. Hockenberry's point about the stairs in front of the retail on Park Avenue. I think it would be good to see if we can come up with a different solution. Our experience on the Broadway has taught us that that is not a great way to activate that retail. So I just want to emphasize that I agree with that point. And really on a positive note, I'm okay now with the massing and the step backs on Park Avenue by the residential units, and that's just my own opinion on those.
I'm sorry.
That's it? No.
I just wanted to respond to your earlier question about the size of this assemblage. I think you have to look at this opportunity, and I call it an opportunity because you're getting into the question of, in the development world, of critical mass. You know, if you have less land than this, for example, you'll start moving towards away from retail destinations as we know it in our world, and you'll start moving to more traditional type developments that you've seen in the city and other places, which are residential above first floor retail with confined parking. In some places you see office over first floor retail and confined parking, and you see in those types of developments 15,000, 20,000 square feet of retail. I mean, there's examples all around the city here. And the parking is difficult to get in and out. Sometimes, in some places, doesn't really exist, and in some places, it's certainly not sufficient. We saw an opportunity as we started to have success in assembling this many parcels as an opportunity to really create a destination. And I think what you all are seeing and some of the things that you've said that you've noticed that have changed about the project that you like is the sense of place, the interior. And I think that this project has become more of a commercial retail destination. I personally think it's anchored properly with a theater. I think the public space contributes heavily to that destination. And to pull off those concepts as a developer, you've got to have enough land. And I remember talking to folks in City Council in the early stages of our work on this block, and there was a lot of talk in the early stages about, do you have enough critical mass to create a destination? We want a destination. We want something different than what we've been experiencing in the city before with our residential buildings over single-story retail that the city is telling us they don't feel is that successful. We believe that we've assembled enough land to have the critical mass, and we think that we have designed a modern urban, we call it village in our world, well mixed with retail, so that we are very confident that this can be a successful retail destination, which was one of the things, again, early on that City Council said, hey, look, we don't want to go down the road with this project, with the residential aspects of this project and the special exception rezoning unless this is really going to produce something special from a standpoint of fiscal impact on the city and amenities. And I feel very proud and very pleased so far, it still needs a lot of work, that we've really created a sharp, sophisticated destination that has a lot of the amenities, I might venture to say almost all of the amenities that the community has talked about and would like to see. Pedestrian-oriented retail, sizable gathering spaces for the public. Hopefully they're counting on us to use this space to bring in top-notch restaurants, and many of them. And in many cases, we've talked to folks in the community that really have long looked for a theater, a quality theater, to come into the city. Going back to your point earlier, I think you've got to assemble enough land to be able to accomplish something like that, which is a destination that has the draw capabilities to be successful long term. And it has the income to allow you to spend money on materials and make it a certain level of quality in appearance, which drives certain types of tenants and makes everybody happy.
Okay, so
We're going to do this pretty quickly due to the lateness.
Another question. I
Oh,
only got to ask
yes,
one
go ahead.
question.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Should have kicked me.
Well, I didn't want to start out at a negative note. I'd like to go to Russ's question about the WOD trail. That is something that the Northern Virginia Regional Association says that they're not going to be obligated financially for it. Are you offering that as part of your package?
So again, they're not going to be,
They're not going to be financially responsible for it. They don't mind it being redone, but that's not going to be
correct, you're correct.
their problem. So are you
Correct.
going to be picking that up when the financial, the financing of it, when you do this project?
At the intersection, that is correct, of what you see
So
there
what-
at Weston Park.
So the intersection would just be a crossover?
The intersection, the trail's going to be brought down to the intersection, and then we're going to create the crossover at the intersection.
because they're also fixing the road.
They're what?
And we're realigning that road with the trails to be able to create that crossing. So we
But
are.
do we know when the Northern Virginia Regional Association is going to be, Trail Association, whatever it's called, is going to be doing that? Is it going to be in conjunction with your project?
I think that's correct, right? Yes, that's correct. We've had several meetings. Our people have had several meetings with them. I have not been in those meetings, but my understanding is yes.
So that would be something that we could count on, that would be incorporated into the project?
Yes. Now, I hesitate to speak for the Park Authority, but
Well, that's what I'm
But,
worried about.
yeah.
I mean, you might put a
Well, we can certainly-
crosswalk there,
we
and it
can
wouldn't
certainly-
happen for 10 more years.
right. We can certainly qualify and make sure we understand clearly what the park is going to be doing to make what you see happen.
Right. Okay. My next question is, going back to the theaters.
Oh, I just want to say
Yes.
one thing
Uh-huh.
in response to what you're talking about. I have attended a couple of those meetings, and one of the things that the park is very interested in is the safety of this crossing coming to the intersection, and so are we. And the comment from the community and from the city has been that creating this crossing is very important, and we agree with that. So we're going to be playing our part to make sure that this happens.
Okay.
And I'll get some answers to you on what the park's doing
Yeah,
and what we're
because
doing.
I think we need to see something in writing from them saying that this is all, there's not much sense in realigning the crosswalk if it's going to go nowhere. So, affordable housing units. This has changed, and now you're offering an in lieu of payment. I feel strongly, too, as Lindy does, that we really need the units. Can we get you to go back to the units?
We'll talk about that.
Pardon me?
I haven't even seen the Housing Commission's comment.
Well, I'm not even waiting for the Housing Commission's comment. I'm saying that this is something that I personally feel is important. We need these units in every new
Okay.
development.
But
And,
we'll huddle on that and get back to you about
okay.
that.
And on the movie theater, I know that you feel and are optimistic that it's going to be a success and that it's going to bring something to this project. So I'm wondering why in a community meeting that I attended, you refer to it as a loss leader. What does that mean?
That's just lingo in the business.
I know it's lingo, but I want to know what it
Grocery
means.
stores are loss leaders, theaters are loss leaders.
Loss leader to whom?
And a loss leader means it's a leader in drawing customers to a
But
development.
who's losing in this?
Well, let me just explain. So it's a leader in that it's drawing customers and those customers are spending money and the project's tenants are doing well. It's a loss because the rent that the theater pays or a grocer pays is below what the marketplace pays for space in an area, in a location or a market. So that's why it's called a loss leader. And theaters are traditionally, as grocers, are loss leaders because they serve an anchor purpose and they're very expensive to build. In the case of a grocery store, they're a low margin retailer, and so they do not pay the rent.
So they're a loss.
It's another-
They're a loss to the developer, but not necessarily the community.
That's correct. That is a financial term.
I understand.
Leader bringing in customers and revenue, loss because they pay a very low rent. So it's a loss to the development. Not a loss to their business. Most of them.
Overall, though, it's a gain to the developer, in a sense.
Well, I would hope. I mean, it would seem to me that a developer would never encourage a theater or a grocery store if they were losing money on it. I mean,
Well,
I just didn't understand why you would use it in that context, particularly because you were encouraging us to do that.
Right, and the reason developers do it all around the country is because of the draw power that a theater or a grocer, two very good examples, create for a development. And so your ability to get higher rents from your other retailers has a lot to do with the kind of anchors you have in the project. And those anchors have lower margin businesses, so they need lower rent, but also they recognize that they're a draw and they produce that other side of economic benefit to the development.
Okay. And my final question, and I think you've already answered this, but I just want to really lock it in, is the retail that's going to be on West Street, all along West Street, those will have entrances from West Street into those retail units.
Where are you?
West Street.
On West Street, okay. Where you see the pedestrian breezeway is an access point that's going to have retail on either side and storefronts facing West Street there. The majority of the storefronts are going to be on West Broad Street, facing out on West Broad Street,
Right.
and on Mason Lane on either side or inside the Market Square.
So there's no retail entrances on West Street?
No, around the breezeway there will be. There'll be front door entrances. Now,
On the breezeway or on West Street?
On either side.
No, on West Street, on West Street. Okay, so the breezeway,
You put a screen up that we could see in a little bit better than that?
yeah, it'll be on West Street. It'll be on West Street.
There's two entrances.
Now, there will be some tenants, as you see in urban projects, will have dual entrances. And that's something that we have to just work with the tenants on.
But you did have a slide showing the retail shops all around. I'd like to see that.
One with labels.
Am I going the wrong way?
Nope.
It was,
Wanted the breezeway.
Oh, there it is, wasn't it?
No.
no, yeah, there it is. Okay. So on the one part, I can't even see what that says. My concern is that all of these places are going to have entrances facing either Mason Square or that little breezeway, and they're not, when you walk up West Street,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to get in to any of those shops unless you go inside
Right. And the way that the breezeway is going to work is they're not going to be they're not going to be primary store entrances on the breezeway. That day spa configuration you're seeing is going to have retail storefront on West Street. And then to the south, those retailers to the south of the stairwell there will have storefronts on West Street. Some of them will have the smaller shops will have dual storefronts.
Mm-hmm.
But the parking is to the back, so you'll want some.
The fitness will have dual storefronts, for example.
This doesn't show the piece there. So you're gonna have, it's going to be divided. So you're going to have tenants outward facing at both. You have double loaded corridors.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And we were saying we're looking at some double loaded corridors for these buildings where we can have
I
tenants
remember you
facing on
saying
both
there would be
sides.
interior quarters. I was trying to figure out how that would work. But I expect that when you come back for our next either work session or meeting or whatever, you'll have we'll have it here that we can see it better, and it will be better defined. Okay.
And your main, of course, your destination is Mason Road, Market Square, and then West Broad Street. That's your core.
Well, I think West Street is just as important. But
Well, okay, so that's an excellent segue. And some of it went to Russ's excellent question. I did not understand any of the trash and loading, but mostly what I don't understand is Mason Lane, which has a traffic light and is sort of a major thoroughfare. And yet, if I look at this, those are parallel parking spaces. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's a very narrow, I just don't understand what you're anticipating the use of Mason Lane is, particularly if now it's also going to be used for potentially for loading. So what you would imagine the traffic counts, what you would imagine people getting in. It seems to me that you have to have a fair number of cars both going to the hotel and the parking, but it's also parallel parks, so that's not, I don't think it's wide enough, but I don't understand how you're programming that.
First of all, on the loading would be at off hours times.
Sure.
Limited. The idea is to create a market street.
But if I'm understanding, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, if I'm understanding your tenant mix, I mean, I'm not sure that your off hours are what you think the off hours are entirely. And I will tell you as an everyday user of Mike's Deli, you know, they're very busy early in the morning. And so if you have parking there and, you know, that's the most proximate parking to that site, I think it will be taken up. So I just don't, it's just completely unclear. My sense is that's 10 feet too narrow.
I think it's a 24-foot road.
So 10, 10, 14. Well, so you're, okay.
And those are standard parallel parking. We're trying to create a market street, okay, with parallel parking.
So Marketplace at Clarendon is not 24 feet. I think it's 32 feet.
Typical drive aisle would be 24 feet wide.
Well, but I'm saying, okay, so the point of my question is to say, I don't understand it. A typical drive aisle where?
Anywhere.
Expand on that.
It'd be a road.
So if I go to Reston Town Center and I was to measure, it'd be 24 feet.
It's 2 lane, 2 way.
Yeah.
Should be.
Well, it's 2 lane, but you can't, so in Reston, they specifically did it so some sides have parallel parking, some sides don't. That's not what you're showing there.
No. 24 feet is the drive aisle, and then you
Before
got
you get the space.
8.5 on either side for the parallel spots.
Right.
24 plus 17. Right. It's 41 feet across to curb, where the parking is.
Oh, it does not look like 41 feet. In one of the renderings, it doesn't look like 41 feet. If it's 41 feet, that's fine. Okay. We can skip that for next
And
time.
I mean, if I can, also, we've been talking to a number of tenants about valet parking. And so there will be valet parking, and we think Mason Lane will be valuable to creating valet parking stations.
Well, okay, so I even more don't understand Mason Lane now. Okay, so we'll have to get into that. That doesn't really look like 41 feet, and if you have valet parking and some other things, in some ways that's good, but I just don't understand like how.
You don't understand the dimensions. You're not seeing the dimensions.
If you have busy retailers with only one sort of main road through the project, this just doesn't feel like I understand how the trash and loading and other things are going to actually happen. So let's talk quickly about Park Avenue and all the challenges, because this is very specific. So the Portico retail was designed specifically with the idea of activating Maple down at Tinner Hill. That was the idea of it. There was a feeling like that was just sort of a dead space, and so they came up with the Portico retail. I think this, although this is sort of like an okay idea, I think it's still discordant to have commercial users on Park Street, and I'm going to get to this in a second, but I think what was sort of trying to happen, particularly if you have the organic market on the corner, I think there was a feeling like we were not trying to activate that portion. And I will just say from a planning standpoint, I think the transition was to have somehow done residential on that side. I think it softened the building height behind it. I think the commercial is tricky. I absolutely don't think the way the grade works for commercial users, but I do think it would work for something that was more residential. Maybe there was some sort of, townhouse or something that was there that at least sort of softened, that as you transition down into the neighborhood. I think it would help that building height. I would ask this question, dovetailing on what Andy said on the too big. You have assembled a lot of parcels here which add cost to the property, and you had a thing about creating critical mass, and so I understood that and I heard that. What I would be very interested in, and you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of, this 123 Main Street cost us this money, we had to add this number of units, but I think one of the challenges with this project is that it may be over-assembled relative to this site, and so that we've gotten a size now that it is getting to be too big, and some of it has to do with what's assembled. So it's conceivable to me that sometimes the whole is too big, and so I would be very interested in some of these assemblages. If you could get back, a small parcel with a 5,000 square foot building, which you got to now build 5,000 square feet of office, which I got to believe is a management and leasing headache for you. It just feels like it's getting to be a little bit too cumbersome, and we can get into the details of that later. Parking, I would say very quickly, part of the challenge we have on the parking is we had this parking study which basically always quotes till I can say personally I'm tired of hearing that Rosalind Ballston had this experience with parking. So here is my final word of the evening to you, unless somebody has anything else. The challenge with this site you've used several times, and originally in the first couple of hours I was keeping track, you've used the words urban. And I absolutely understand that we live in an area that is urbanizing. But I would submit to you, and I would suggest to you, that the people who live on West Street, the people who live on Grove Street, the people who live on Mount Daniel Street, the people who live on Highland, don't necessarily believe that they live in an urban area and didn't really sign on to live in an urban area. And I feel very seriously that it is our job, it is our responsibility to make a transition which may be inevitable to an urbanizing area. Because if someone's coming in from McLean to go to this theater, they're going to drive through suburban neighborhoods. They're not going to drive down a city street. They're going to drive through someone's neighborhood where their kids are playing in the front yard. So I don't I do believe this project is too big. I do believe this project is continually growing rather than going the other way. And I think part of the challenge that we face is to sort of come out with something that's a little bit more to scale, which may or may not be possible. But I would suggest to you that you know, I'm not sure that our friends and neighbors agree that we live in the urban area that you may see here. So that's all I have.
I wasn't trying to describe the total area as urban area. I think this project is urban in nature itself, the way that it's designed.
Okay. How are people getting there?
It's got a market square, and it's got structured parking, and you know, I think a lot of people would classify that project itself as an urban type of project.
Okay. Okay.
I don't disagree with what you're saying either, that, you know, there are a lot of single-family neighborhoods in Falls Church, and they're dense neighborhoods, but I wouldn't classify them as urban neighborhoods.
Well, and this site is unique in that the access to this site really primarily is through the suburban neighborhoods. And so that's what raises that concern, and it just came up so many times tonight, I thought it would point that out. Anyone, very quickly?
Just briefly, again, we're all expressing our own individual feelings on this, and we've not collectively voted on anything. But also, again, the Planning Commission itself is doing a lot of good questioning, but in essence, we're also doing the push-pull routine, which is difficult at a certain point with development. And with having, you know, to have done a lot of work on things and have tried to aggregate all the ideas that are coming through, and yet we are discussing some pretty big changes. And I think that can be a very difficult thing to deal with, and for the developer and for us up here also, because I think we're at that critical spot that, yeah, we can make some changes, but I think huge changes, I would not like to get too much involved in.
Huge changes what, to the community or to this project?
Pardon me?
Huge changes to what?
To the project.
Well,
Okay. I would just say, to Rob's point, personally, I feel like the consolidation of the lots on Broad Street is a valuable component to the project. I think the consolidation of the residential lots on Park are less valuable, although without that, I think it probably makes it, the challenges of transitioning from commercial to residential become more difficult. And hopefully, whatever Rob said is specific enough with you guys to make the project smaller. It wasn't clear to me, but that's my concern, is that we haven't given you guidance other than make it smaller, which I think is too bad, but I guess that's what we got.
all right. Good God, 11 o'clock. I missed our deadlines. The Capitals won, if you were curious. Okay. What's that?
What was the final score?
1-0.
1-0.
I'm sorry if you DVR'd it. You were going to go home later and watch that. I didn't even think of that. Okay, that's it. We're done. Good night.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.